Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another round of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, as brought to you on the Premier Sim Racing platform, available only on PC, known as iRacing. And we are here today for round number 6 of the series that is continuing to go from strength to strength, and indeed the racing only seems to intensify with round to round. And as our drivers make the way through Europe on the series European Tour, it is the case that we find ourselves today in Austria at the circuit known as the Red Bull Ring. In particular, our drivers will be racing at the national variant, a much shorter variant from what you typically see in your major motorsported events such as Formula 1 and whatnot, but I can assure you it'll be the case that whilst this variant is going to be a short circuit, by no means is it going to be less dramatic than where we have been over the last 5 rounds. And with this being a sprint round tonight, the racing will be fast, it'll be furious, and I can imagine there'll be certainly some sparks flying with each and every lap that is turned. It is the case, of course, this broadcast being a post-round broadcast, all the racing action occurring earlier in the week, all the way back on what was Monday the 15th of August, but we're bringing it to you as if it were live for your viewing pleasure, both on Twitch and YouTube. On Twitch you can tune in via twitch.tv/TX141, and on YouTube you can go to youtube.com and search for Paul Walsh or TX141TX and tune in there. And our schedule for tonight is as follows: times in British summertime, that's BST or UTC +1. In approximately 14 minutes time, we'll begin underway with the qualifying session, 15 minutes in length, to determine our grid for the purposes of today's opening race. Of course, there are 3 races on the schedule today, and the grid will be set based on qualifying for sprint heat number 1. That's race number 1, a 15-minute sprint race that will kick off at approximately 8 o'clock. Immediately after that, we'll be transitioning to race number 2, known as Sprint Heat 2, another 15-minute race. Before then, we take a brief pause and then return for the build-up to the Sprint Feature Race, a 30-minute finale of the sprint round, and that will be brought to you at approximately 8:45 tonight. But indeed, with 3 sprints on the schedule and major points up for grabs, it is the case that the tone of the races shifts from being a bit more strategic, as we saw last time out at Monza in the Feature Race round, to something that resembles a bit more of a points grab with each and every race and lap turn. And answer in the commentary box, where you heard me mention earlier TX141 or Paul Walsh, that is I, your host and commentator, and I'll be bringing you all of the racing action from start to finish over the course of this season, included tonight. I'm also known as Brit of the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. But as we look from what is our schedule for today to the season so far and what lies ahead, it is the case, of course, that we can see that we started all the way back on the 11th of July at Belle Isle in Detroit in the United States of America, and what an opener that was. The feature race round there really started off the season with a bang, and indeed, with there being 13 rounds and only 1 winner on the schedule, it is the case that we've actually had a brilliant way to open that up. But the story then went to the first sprint round on the 18th of July at Laguna Seca in Monterey County, and we saw once again in the Californian state that the racing was close, and indeed the contrast of the feature race round at Belle Isle versus the sprint races at Laguna Seca really set us up for what was a brilliant amount of racing action. We then went back to a feature round at Fuji Speedway in Japan on the 25th of July, before then Alton Park was our last sprint round back on the 1st of August, and my goodness, at Alton Park we definitely saw quite a few body parts off the cars fly. Indeed, a number of drivers have upsets and some drivers pull off unexpected results, and all in between. It led to a brilliant classic, given the fact that Alton Park is known as a classic touring car racing circuit. Last time out, of course, on the 8th of August, it was Monza that played host to the racing. And indeed, no first lap drama at Monza. It was all about lap number 2 at the second chicane, where we saw a huge incident which knocked a significant number of drivers down the order. Indeed, a number of drivers were forced to retire, and it really opened up the field. And of course, your winner last time out, Francois Schink, really demonstrated great pace at Monza, and he'll be the one to watch out for tonight as he continues to try and take the fight to championship leader overall of what is Robert Abrams, and also in what is effectively the Alpha class. But today, the 15th of August, Red Bull Ring, and as we said, the national circuit here, and it is going to be a sprint race round. After this, we'll be heading back to a feature race round at the Italian circuit of Imola on the 22nd of August, before another sprint race round on the 29th of August at Donington Park. Indeed, 2 circuits, very different contrasting natures, but the main theme of the pair of them, direction changes. They are going to be circuits which will change our driver's ability to maintain the momentum of the car through each and every corner. And after Donington Park, we'll then be heading to Interlagos in South America, the Brazilian circuit, on the 5th of September, which will wrap up the first portion of the season before we do have our mid-season break, and then we'll only have 4 more rounds when we return from that mid-season break, starting on the 19th of September with the Canadian Motorsport Tyre Park. And indeed, it is the case that the Canadian circuit, perhaps the fastest circuit on our calendar in terms of average overall lap speed, if you do not include Monza in that comparison, and the circuit is one for sprint races. You can imagine those sprint races are going to be incredible to wrap up the sprint races on the calendar, and more on those when we do get to them in round number 10. And there'll be a Mid-Ohio and Watkins Glen on the 26th of September and the 3rd of October respectively, which see the series return to the United States of America for 2 feature race rounds, and then we have the season finale on the 10th of October as our drivers will take to the circuit. We'll be bringing the broadcast, of course, after the round, a couple of days after, but at Road Atlanta we'll be turning the final laps in the special round as highlighted in purple-pink there. And indeed, the rules on that to be confirmed. It's going to be different from our feature race rounds, which are of course shown in blue, and our sprint race rounds, which are shown in yellow, but plenty still to look forward to. But as we think about tonight, it is the case that the Red Bull Ring National plays host to our drivers. The circuit located in Spielberg in the Styrian region of Austria. Indeed, a circuit, as you can see from the circuit map provided to us by simracingwiki.com, a rather short one, a very fast laps around here. We're expecting a lap time of approximately 55 seconds, somewhere in the region of 54 to 56 seconds, depending on the car setup, the amount of fuel and whatnot. But it is going to be, with only 6 corners, a very tricky circuit, because as you can see, it is the case that each series of corners is separated by a significant straightaway, and that means that if you're not able to get the move done firmly into a given corner and through corner apex, then you are subject to a counter-attack in the run to the next corner. And where it's the run from the start-finish line up towards Niki Lauda corner at turn 1, of course named after the infamous Formula 1 driver, indeed no longer with us, and it is the case of rest in peace Niki Lauda. You will always be remembered for your feats of daring in motorsport, and it is the case our drivers will head from Niki Lauda corner all the way out to turns 2 and 3, the S chicane if you will, before they make their way through the Kink of 4 and then down the back straight to turn number 5 at Jochen Rindt corner. Of course, Jochen Rindt, another famous motorsporting legend, and as they make their way through turn number 5 down towards turn 6, the 2 sweeping right-handers, where turn 6 a bit of a downhill drop, and in particular a very tricky apex, the very high apex curve that our drivers need to deal with. The A1 corner will see the lap completed. The A1 corner, of course, named after the Red Bull Ring circuit, as it was previously known as the A1 Ring circuit back in the 1990s, but of course the circuit now in the ownership of the Red Bull Energy Drinks Company, bought out by Dietrich Mateschitz in 2011, and well, the circuit has seen a new lease of life. But speaking of a lease of life, let's bring those rules to life. And it is the case in the sprint race round today, our drivers will have fuel loads restricted to 39 litres in the car for each and every race and qualifying portion of the round. And in the sprint races, we will see that there are no pit stops expected in any of the 3 races. If a driver makes their way to the pits, it is because of a drive-through penalty or damage to the car that they need to repair. And whilst the grid for race 1 will, of course, be set by the qualifying results, it will be the case that the grid for race 2 shall be a top 4 reverse of race 1's results. So it is the case whoever wins race 1 will start in 4th place in race number 2. Conversely, whoever comes 4th in race number 1 starts on pole. And whoever comes 5th in race number 1, well, as it says on the tin, they'll be starting in 5th place for race number 2, all the way down to the last place finisher, starting at the back of the grid. And then the grid for race number 3 shall be a top 8 reverse of race 2's results, whereby the same format applies, of course. If a driver finishes 8th in race number 2, they will be starting on pole. The winner of race number 2 starts 8th, and then beyond 8th place, the drivers will line up as they finished in race number 2. And as for penalties, the drivers shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 9 or more instant points, and they shall receive disqualification from the round if they accumulate 16 or more instant points. And as for bonus points, it is the case that there are multiple bonus points up for grabs today, and just to remind you of those, 1 point for pole position, 1 point for the fastest lap over all of the races. So indeed, our shoulds will take a look at what is the fastest lap across the 3 races, and whoever had that fastest lap over the 3 races will then take the point. There's 1 point for the Sublime Finesse Award, which is the fewest instants attained over the entirety of the round, both in qualifying and the 3 races. 1 point for leading a lap at a given race. So it is the case if a driver leads a lap in, say, race 1, they'll pick up a point. And then 1 point for the Naked Aggression Award, which is the most overtakes in the round as done by a driver over the course of the 3 races. Indeed, Those bonus points, always a conundrum and something our drivers have to factor in for the simple reason they could help in their long-term championship aspirations. But that's enough rules, that's enough regulations and everything else in between. I know what you're all here for. Let's head back to the circuit and indeed take a look at our drivers who are making their way around right now. And we look in particular here to Micah Hendricks, who, unable to make the previous round, of course, at Monza, now back in full force. And we do see the Blue Flag Motorsports driver here in that wonderful Hyundai Veloster rolling his way up into turn 1 right now in this final practice warm-up session here in a queue of cars. And indeed, what are we expecting in the qualifying session, you may ask? Well, slipstream is going to be a huge factor. There is no doubt about that. And much like what we saw at Monza, oh goodness me, that's a massive whack to the wall there for one of our Honda Civics. And I'm not 100% sure who that was who made it into the wall. That was a nasty shunt. They're definitely going to have to jump to the pits after that, no doubt about that. But it is the case. Micah Hendricks, it will be, like many, they focus on the slipstream here for the given reason with so many straights. It is the case you can gain a couple of attempts a lap by simply being in the tow of another car, because you can imagine that these touring car racing class cars, or TCR class cars as they're known in the abbreviation, they punch a major hole in the air in front of them, and if you're in the draft of one of them you can gain massively. Of course, being in that slipstream can also have the counter effect of what is the fact that through the corners you'll get that dirty air and therefore a bit of understeer. Well, there being a limited number of corners, the only corners where you really feel that effect will be in the braking zone for turns 5 and 6, given the fact those are sweeping style corners, and also turn 1 to an extent as well, but turns 2 and 3 are more focused on heavy braking and transitioning onto that front end of the car, and therefore that understeer effect may not be as prevalent in these touring car racing class cars. But as we look here from Micah Hendricks to some other drivers further over the field, it is the case, of course, we see Casey Nemetz here making their way on through a little bit behind Micah Hendricks, and well, the number 140 driver, of course, made their debut at Monza in brilliant fashion, and as we see them making their way into the right-hander here of turn number 5 with what is the Yellow Flag Motorsport machine behind, it is the case that we're looking forward to seeing what Casey's able to do once again here today after a good start at Monza. Not quite able to steal the spotlight, unlike Alex Jensen, who pulled off the win in the Delta class after, of course, that major drama at the start of the race in Monza on lap number 2, which saw the championship leader really fall out of contention, had to go to the pits. And speaking of our championship leader, well, it is the case, I can tell you, that Connor Achatella right now in the pit lane, and well, the number 55 driver here today, he will be looking to try and build it all back up after finding that momentum was lost. Of course, it was the case that Achatella made it to the end of the race, albeit did not finish as the winner, but still picked up some critical points. So it is the case the number 55 driver knows that the job is not done, and he is delivering time and time again as he makes his way back out of the circuit right now with 3 minutes of this final warm-up session to go. And I think he's just trying to burn off a little bit of the itch that he needs to scratch in qualifying, which is to deliver those laps. Now, if you are tuning in, of course, via YouTube, alternatively Twitch, do not be shy. Feel free to say hi if you have access to the chat. Let us know, of course, if you are one of the drivers who did tune in, was participating in this race, I should really say. Do let us know what your thoughts are of the circuit, but do not give away, of course, what happens in the races for those of you who are tuning in who did not have already heard about the racing. Or alternatively, it is the case that you're watching this live for the first time. And, of course, I, as your host and commentator, do not know what exactly happens, whether it's in this final warm-up session, whether it's in the qualifying session or the free sprint races, so no spoilers please. Of course, that is the limitation of us bringing you the racing broadcast as a post-round broadcast as if it's live, but we are trying to give you the very best we can in terms of giving you that live experience. But as we see Achatella making his way into turn 1, we look from him to Jesse Bodas here, and Bodas rolling his way through the right-hander of turn number 4, and it was Bodas who had the major whack to the wall at turn number 2. And as he makes his way up to speed at turn number 5, the number 100 driver here looking not too strong at the moment in this final warm-up session. Currently 2.2 seconds off of the fastest lap set in the practice session. And with 23 drivers taking to the circuit today, with Aaron Lahr there yet to put a time in. And well, Aaron Lahr, of course, having some difficulty last time out at Monza. And we do hope to see him coming back in full force tonight. You can imagine it's going to be a quite quiet grid compared to perhaps the volume 10 upwards towards 30 cars that we're used to. But at the same time, this is one of those circuits where drivers will be feeling they can potentially drop it as a round. I can tell you one thing that we're not dropping, and that is the presence of our Audi RS3 drivers, including Fernando Takahashi, the 998 driver here, making his way right now through the S-chicane and heading out to turn number 4. It's great to see him back on the circuit, but we haven't just got one Audi taking to the circuit today. We've also got another one in the hands of Corey Fluke, and we've missed seeing both of them. It is the case. It always makes me personally smile when we do see one of our Audi RS3s take to the circuit. It's not a car that goes too too well at the moment in terms of the current balance of performance on iRacing, but at the same time, it's always great to see car variety. We do see a lot of Hyundai Elantras. We also see some Honda Civic Type Rs and Hyundai Velostas, but the Audi is a bit of a unicorn car, but we do have two unicorns out there, and they're shining bright. But as we look for Corey Fluke here, to Francois Schink, the big name at the moment, in the fact able to take that major result at Monza, not our championship leader overall or in the Alpha class, but indeed trying to close that gap to championship leader of Abrams, who's currently in the pit lane, and Francois Schink will be looking to continue to build that momentum tonight. Now, as to how you can tell who's in which class, on the time in town, indeed on the name in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you can see if a driver has a blue sash against their name, as Francois Schink does, it is the case they are part of our Alphas, or our Pro class, if you will, so our top-tier class, and it is the case that if they've got a purple sash or a purple-pink sash on their name, such as Auguste Blondel here, who parks up and jumps to the pits very shortly, it is the case, and also we see Spencer Cockayne the same here, they are part of our Delta class, newly introduced as a Season 5, our Pro-Am class equivalent, if you will, but everybody is competing within the same points scoring mechanism. It is the case whether they finish in P1 or P4 in the Delta class, overall they'll be picking up the same points as if they were within their own class, and therefore they are encouraged, our Deltas, to battle with the Alphas just as much as their drivers in their own class, as we do head into qualifying. And unfortunately, it has been pointed out in the previous sprint round broadcast back in round number 4 that we do have the what is the times already there, our qualifying times as shown, which does spoil the qualifying session a little bit. We are currently working with our broadcast software providers to try and find a fix for that. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find a fix between what was the previous round in round number 4 and today's round, but we are hoping to have a fix in place for that as soon as possible. So we are instead of focusing on who's going to be setting those fastest lap times, because it will be that order you see there on the left hand side as they are going to line up on the grid. Let's talk a little bit about the circuit instead, and watching out for the specifics of each and every car, as we do see our drivers head now into this qualifying session. And as they do, we focus here on Daniel Smith, of course, as he makes his way out of turn number 4 and up towards 5, and as he rolls his way in, of course, into that turn 5 corner here. It is the case the Talkstick Racing Machine looking very smart and very sensible, and as we ride on board with the Veloster driver, let's let Smith take you around for a flying lap of the national circuit. So heading out to the final corner here and across that timeline to go onto a lap, and heading up towards turn 1, it will be the case looking into that heavy braking zone, and as he comes onto the brakes here, snapping those brakes on hard into turn number 1 and rolling the car through the right-hander in 3rd gear before heading up towards turn number 2. It's a short run, a heavy braking zone for the 100-metre board or the 50-metre board, somewhere in between depending on the car and the driver's preference, looking at about 65 metres there for Smith, and as he makes his way from the right into left here, it is the case having to use those apex curves to roll the car through and get that extra rotation, but then trying to get down the powers. He makes his way in the transition to turn number 4, and as he makes his way out the corner there, actually back it off, being as though that was an abortive lap and losing the draft there for Smith. So he's decided he's going to wait his turn and go again very shortly. So instead we will jump from Daniel Smith to other drivers around the circuit, and we'll look to Matt Shepka here as he makes his way through the final corner, and the Talkstick Racing driver heading out to that final right-hander towards the timeline here to set his first flying lap of the session, and then he goes on to another flying lap, and as he heads on through, let's take you through on the Honda Civic Type R. So making his way in towards that first quarter braking zone, braking at 105 metres and rolling the car down into 2nd gear, and as he exits, stamping back on the throttle and heading up towards 4th or 5th gear, depending on the gearing of the car, 4th gear in the Honda, and then braking at just shy of the 50 metres, but about 55 metres into turn number 2, going as late as possible. Of course, the nature of the Honda Civic Type R being that it's got the ability to brake later than everybody else due to the strength of those brakes, and as he makes his way through 3 and 4, it is the case now accelerating his way all the way up the hill to the crest that leads into turn number 5. Into Jochen Ring corner he goes, and looking to his left for the brake marker, which is at that 50 metre board. They're braking at about 60 metres, using the marshal's post as well as a potential marker, and now using that runoff curb and widen the entry into turn number 6. And as he makes his way through the A1 ring corner, he exits on out him, brings the car over to the right, and I think it is the case he may have a slowdown there, taking a lot of whip to the exit of the corner, and drivers have got to be aware of that. And that is one of the things as well that our drivers may get a bit of frustration with, is the fact that track limits here at the Red Bull Ring can be quite nasty when you get it wrong, and that may just come back to haunt some drivers who are on the perfect lap, only to run a little bit too far when they come to the end of the lap of the final corner. As we see Jerome Pajulos here make his way up towards turn number 1 now. It is the case in what is there, the Hyundai Elantra, looking good in the number 99 car, is the Beaver Buzz Energy driver, and as he makes his way all way up towards turn number 2. It is the case just trying to put in a solid lap here as we do look at those lap times on the left-hand side. And well, you can see it is the case that eventually he will be looking at around the P11 mark. In fact, he will be qualifying P11 because those are the final times. And again, we do apologise for the fact those times are announced immediately. But as he heads on through and up towards turn number 5, how are we expecting the run of form today for the cars? Well, we do know that the Elantra, it seems to be the all-rounder, and a very strong all-rounder at that, but it's not going to be just the Hyundai Elantra that runs away proceedings. We're expecting the Veloster to go quite well here as well, with its snappy gearbox and also strong handling characteristics. The Honda Civics may struggle here, to be fair, because this is quite a power-focused circuit, and the Honda does lack the power compared to the other cars within its class. The Audi RS3s, again, may struggle a little bit because their power is focused around the higher gears rather than the lower and mid portion of the gearbox. So I think it will be a Hyundai day today, and whoever in the Hondas and the Audis could take some major points, they will be very happy with those. But that's why we have 3 sprint races, of course, because anything can happen between each and every race. And speaking of anything that can happen, we do hope that in the near future we do see Paul Mateschitz heading back to the circuit. I hope you're doing well, Paul, and I appreciate that's probably not how I quite pronounce your surname. I still need to practice pronouncing your surname, but I hope you're having a great weekend, and I'm happy to have you tuning in the YouTube chat. But as we do see here, Jerome is making his way into turn number 5. We look from him to Fernando Takahashi, who right now making his way through turns 2 and 3. 5 minutes of this qualifying session complete, another 10 to go. It is the case, rolling his way on through turn number 4, and as he heads up towards turn 5 and 6, it is one of the situations where I think Takahashi at this point already just trying to get some laps under his belt here, and well, knowing that he's going in the end to be qualifying in P21 based on those times we've got on the left hand side, which are our finalised times as we're to understand it. It is the case that for Takahashi, he's got to essentially work his positions in the race. But regardless, let's run on board here with the Audi Sport Customer Racing driver as he makes his way to that timeline where he was going to, and then he's decided to peel off and jump to the pit. So we won't be getting that lap from him, but what we will do is watch Corey Fluke here making his way on through turn number 2 and heading into 3, and as he does so, it is the case he rolls his way through the right into left. Well, it will be one of the situations for the 999 driver here, looking quite smart right now, P15, and that is a good starting position for him. And given the fact that we have quite a limited Delta field taken to the circuit today, we've actually got a bit of an imbalance towards what is our Alphas, the blue sash drivers, of course. You can imagine here our Deltas, we looking to try and get in amongst those Alphas and really try and snatch some points off of them to help their own championship aspirations. As we now jump on board with Corey Fluke, and hopefully he doesn't blow over to the right at the end of this lap, and he carries on through as he heads up the hill towards turn number 1. As he makes his way up the hill and into the braking zone here, braking at just beyond that 100 metre, but braking about 80 metres and rolling the car through, but taking a lot of speed and just about keeping it in track limits there. They can put all 4 wheels beyond the white line, so as long as they keep 2 wheels on the right hand side of that sausage curb, but a bit unsettled there under braking into turn number 2 as he rolls his way through 2 and into 3. It is a case that very difficult turn 2, and instead now had to really get the car realigned for the run through turns 3 and 4. Use those apex curves to rotate the Audi, but you can see here I think Fluke feeling as though this lap has been a difficult one and it's not quite gone the way he's wanted it to, as he makes his way into turn number 5 and rolling his way through the right hander here. It's going to be a setup lap instead as he comes into turn 6, and turn 6 is a very tricky corner to brake for. There's no real apparent brake markers, although there is a bit of a cheeky brake marker you can use in the race, and in fact that is on the left hand side, and we'll talk about it on our next on board lap. It's where the outer curbing starts to end and come back in towards the racetrack. There is a cut-off point, but you can use that as your protective marker. But meanwhile, we look from our Audi driver here to a Hugh Just privateer of what is Giovanni Romano as he makes his way through turn number 2, and as he rolls his way through the right hander 2 into 3. Currently right now Romano, the fastest Honda Civic Type R driver out of those out there. Indeed, we have a limited number of Honda Civics. We've got mostly what is Hyundai class cars in the field here, or Hyundai manufactured cars I should really say, and it's that intermingling of course of Velosters and Elantras. But again, Romano, the Honda Civic driver who made his announcement on the scene in Season 5 back at Alton Park in round number 4, and we'd love to see him take the fight to the field there, and he'll be looking to do the same again tonight as he makes his way down the start finish straight here to set another lap time, and that is a 54.768, and that will be the time that takes it to that P11 come at the end of this qualifying session as he makes his way on through the right hander. But as he does, it is the case here, I think in fact that some of our times are not quite up to date here, so it may be the case that we're getting a mixture of times in terms of the final qualifying times that are set versus those that are actually currently that are being set in or in progress in this qualifying session. So we're going to wait and see whether that timing tower continues to get updated on the left-hand side there. But definitely, we do have some technical issues with that timing tower. And in the meantime, we can just appreciate what our drivers are able to achieve in this qualifying session. The laps they put it in. We're looking from our Honda Civic driver to our Honda Veloster provisional pole driver right now of Micah Hendricks. Hendricks definitely trying to deliver at this point as he makes his way out to turn number 1 and up towards 2. And as he charges into the chicane here, it is the case, of course, rolling his way through the corner. This being an open setup series, our drivers can set the cars up how they prefer them to do. And the setup here today, I think, will be a blend. In terms of downforce, I think our drivers will try and get away with a moderate amount of rear wing. They won't be looking to have a maximum amount of rear wing necessarily, because there are a number of straights here and there's a limited number of corners. So if you put too much rear wing, you may lose out on the straights, but they will be looking, I think, at some sort of middle ground compromise. But as Hendricks rolls his way down, you can see there with the green exit curbing of turn number 5, essentially starts to come back in towards the circuit before the braking zone for turn number 6, and you use that cutting point where that green curbing starts to come back in, all the green runoff area really. That is your brake marker that our drivers will typically use. Hendricks coming across the line there, set of 54.595, not as strong as the lap he will be setting or has set of a 54.438. And indeed it is the case right now, looking good. As meanwhile we look to John Lales on here, making his way up into turn number 1, and the Beaver Buzz Energy driver really right now trying to continue to build that momentum. We have seen John Lales on over the course of the last couple of rounds, really trying to put in some solid displays. Indeed, the team at Beaver Buzz Energy have done a lot of great work in delivering lap after lap in the race, indeed in qualifying, and it goes to show how the momentum is definitely shifting over the course of the races. And what the laps mean here being very small laps by comparison with what we typically see on the calendar, that does also change the nature of this qualifying session. Now, what do I mean by that exactly? Well, on longer circuits, such as, for example, Monza last time out, alternatively Alton Park in round number 4, Belwell in round number 1, etc., it is the case a long circuit where the lap time is over 1.5 minutes normally means that you'll see a pronounced gap in the fastest drivers in the field versus the slower drivers in the field. But when you've got a very short lap, such as here, of course, at Red Bull Ring National, less corners, less places for you to gain the lap time, and there's a bigger emphasis on being in the draft of another driver. What the number of straightaways here, that really changes the complexion of qualifying, because you can suddenly see a driver who would normally be associated with qualifying right up at the top, jumping right up and then getting themselves intermingled. And for example, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful when I say this, but Gus Blondell, who's just jumped to the pits, P3 and only a 10th off of that pole lap. Now you'd think, for example, Gus Blondell has been showing growing pace. We saw great qualifying pace from him back at Monza, but conversely, here's a little bit of drama perhaps. Our championship leader of Robert Abrams, only P12 as he makes his way through the final corner. And normally we see Robert Abrams up on those front 2 rows. It's very rare that we see any sign of him dropping out the top 10. And well, here right now, P12 in this qualifying session. And that's the thing with these shorter circuits, where there's less technical aspects involved with them. And it's not to say the corners aren't technical. That's what we start to see the difference in lap times, as Abrams goes straight on there, carrying way too much speed into turn number 1. I think this time I'm going to jump to the pits and simply try it again very shortly. But he hasn't got long, given the fact there's only 3 minutes left, and it's not looking good here for our championship leader in this qualifying session, as we do look to Travis Orr here, and the Hyundai Veloster driver made his way up towards turn number 1 and into the braking zone. He rolls the car at this point, and he heads through that right hander, looking at P17 currently, P5 out of our Delta qualifiers, and as he makes his way up towards turn number 2, it will be the case, I think, we're going to see quite a bit of battling between himself and Spencer Cockayne and Casey Nemitz, given the close nature of their qualifying times, albeit Cockayne and Nemitz separated by only 300ths, and then there are a further 2 attempts behind Travis Orr. But again, that 2 attempts doesn't really mean much here when the art is in the draft at the Red Bull Ring National Circuit, and also in those sweeping corners, and that is the worry. Indeed, speaking of worries, well, I think right now Achatella will be a little bit worried by the fact he's looking at P9 versus a P3 for Blondell. But then again, the one thing we know about Achatella is that he doesn't just deliver in qualifying, he delivers massive results in the race. And also, here's another thing, and I hate to say it, he's probably going to get fed up of hearing this, it will be the case, he seems to be very, very closely akin to that P9 position, because every time we have seen him take to the circuit in qualifying, he normally qualifies in P9 or spends most of the qualifying session in P9 and then switches out of it at the last possible moment, either gets demoted or improves. And in the races, we've seen a lot of P9 finishes for Achatella. So you can imagine today, when he qualified in P9, he must have been thinking to himself, P9 again, that number seems to be haunting me, and well, it's the case. If it has been haunting him, it's been haunting him positively, because he has been leading the Delta Championship for a long period of time, and nobody's really been able to put a dent in that championship in terms of outright pace and beating him to that checkered flag. And well, can anybody do that today? You'd think that Blondell would be able to do it, given that P3 position on the grid. But as we look from what is Achitella to a bit further up the field, and in particular here to Logan McKenzie, well, he's parked up. In fact, so we're going to look to Francois Schink. It is okay, Schink here having a difficult qualifying session, much like his main rival. Of course, Schink and Abrams the top two in the championship. Schink the challenger, Abrams the championship leader as it currently stands. And with only 1 minute on the clock here, I think Schink at this point deciding enough's enough. He's had a very difficult run through turn number 2. He's going to jump to the pits, and we see Aaron Lahr has been able to put in a lap time to go P20. But meanwhile, Adrian Fedorowski not setting a lap time in this qualifying session. I wonder if there's a technical issue with the car, and he may not be able to put a lap in. We hope to see him on the grid, albeit he'll be starting from the back of the grid when all is said and done. But as he makes his way out of the right-hander, it is the case. Heading up towards turn number 1 right now is Aaron Lahr, and he's got a lot to do. If that P20 is going to be where he starts on the grid, but to be fair, we do know that Aaron Lahr does not back away from a challenge, and in that menacing green Hyundai Elantra, he'll be giving it his all. Will the breakfast for dinner driver as he makes his way into turn number 2 on this final roll around the circuit for him. And as we run and ball goes very deep there, understeers wide at turn number 2, and there's no real way to bring the lap time back when you go deep into turn 2 and understeer. And you can see they're pulling his way off the circuit. As meanwhile, we look to one of his teammates here, what is James Carr, making his way out to turn number 4 and up towards turn 5. And as he makes his way into the turn 5 corner, he won't have time to finish that lap because qualifying ends on the 15-minute mark. And now we head to the grid for race number 1. So as they line up on the grid for race number 1 of round 6 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, brought to you on iRacing at the Red Bull Ring National Circuit, it will be the case that Micah Hendricks lines up on pole for Blue Flag Motorsports, joined by Beaver Buzz's John Lauzon, separated by half a tenth. Auguste Blondell takes pole position in the Delta class, P3 for Blue Flag Motorsports, joined by Breakfast for Dinner's James Carr on that second row. Daniel Smith and Francois Schink will make up our third row, followed by Logan McKenzie and Connor Achitella on row number 4, and then we have Giovanni Romano and David Bowen making up row number 5. That's your top 10. Jerome Bajula starts P11, joined by Robert Abrams, your championship leader, starting very far back, his weakest qualifying position of the season in P12, and then behind them on row number 7, we have Daniel Sedino from Blue Flag Motorsports P13, joined by Justin Rhodes P14. Corey Flute and Matt Shepka make up row number 8, and then it will be the case that behind them we will have Travis Hort and Spencer Cockayne on row number 9, Casey Nimitz and Aaron Lahr on row number 10, and Fernando Takahashi and Jesse Bodas on row number 11, followed by in P23, having not set a lap and hopefully taken to the grid, Adrian Fedorowski. With those technical issues on the car resolved, well, I do hope they are. If not, we may be missing him. He'll be starting P23 for QZ Motorsports. But with our grid covered, we now get ready to go racing here in race number 1 of the sprint round. And well, we just wait for a couple of drivers to get to the grid. I believe we're waiting on 2 drivers in particular, but once they are ready, we will be going green. But as we are only moments away now from going racing here, Micah Hendricks will of course have that outside line to turn 1, and indeed we're about to get the lights. And it's lights out and away we go for race number 1 here. And Micah Hendricks getting a bit of a difficult start. He does not get a quick start. And it's going to be the case that John Lauzon will have the run to turn 1. But look at this from James Carr, trying to get up the inside, but squeezed to the wall there by Lauzon. Lauzon not having any of it. All of our drivers make the way through the opening corner. And as they do here, we can see multiple 2 and 3 wides in sequence as they all make it safely through. But up towards turn number 2 they go. 2 wide hit. John Lauzon defending the inside. Meanwhile, Hendricks trying to go outside to inside into turn number 3. He has to back out. Meanwhile, Daniel Smith also gaining a place at the start of the race. And meanwhile, Francois Schink coming up as well as they roll their way through turns 3 and into 4. And as they do, Daniel Smith under major pressure already. And we can see that Schink going on the offensive. He needs to go early here. He needs to gain as many points as possible as they roll the way down into turn number 5. But as they do, Schink up the inside here. Smith on the outside. They're going to be 2 wide into 6. And it's only a 1 wide corner at turn number 6. And there's contact between the 2 drivers. And as they come out the corner, well, Daniel Smith has been sent off. And Francois Schink continues on here but I can imagine that it will be a very unhappy Daniel Smith, who may have a word with the stewards afterwards as they make the way to the end of lap number 1. And a bit further back here, we can see that Matt Shepka under pressure from Gus Blondell. Indeed, Blondell's lap was not valid in the whole sequence of play. In fact, Blondell's had a very difficult start, my apologies. And as they roll the way through turn number 1, Blondell there up the inside of Shepka, gaining another place as they head towards what is turn number 2. But Blondell having an absolute disaster of a start, and meanwhile Shepka being passed left, right and centre by the Delta drivers as we see Sedano going up the inside there into 2 and holding the position through turn number 3. Meanwhile, Casey Never's trying to go round the outside here. Travis Horn, we said that these two are going to come to blows in qualifying, and it is the case. They're coming to blows right now as they make the way out of 4 and up towards 5. With Nemitz falling back there behind Travis Horn. Horn's got the better acceleration as they make the way into turn number 5, and as they do, we can see it is the case that Spencer Cockayne here for Blue Flag Motorsports battling with Fernando Takahashi heading down into turn number 6, but no change as they make the way out of the final corner and onto lap number 3. So after 2 laps of racing, the field is as follows. It is John Lauzon who leads ahead of pole sitter Mike Hendricks in P2, followed by James Carr in P3. We then have Francois Schink in P4, being followed by Connor Achatella in at P5 there, and as they make the way up towards turn number 2, it is the case Achatella trying to go on the offensive once again, trying to go around the outside to inside cutback line through turn number 2, but Schink is very aware of it and just simply covers him off immediately. He stays where he is. David Bauer P6, followed by Jerome Bajulas in P7, Robert Abrams P8, gaining 4 places since the start of this race, and Justin Rhodes P9, followed by Corey Fluke in P10, completed the top 10 there. Gus Blondell in P11 with a disaster of a start for the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, dropping 8 places in the standing start. An absolutely painful look for Gus Blondell, and indeed now he's got it all to recover after a sensational qualifying session for the driver, and well, that's the way it has gone with these standing starts. And as he makes his way out to the final corner, charging on, as meanwhile Micah Hendricks up the inside here for the lead into turn 1. They go into Nicky Lauda corner, and as they do, Hendricks gets the inside, but John Lauzon now looking to come back as we ride on board with John Lauzon into turn number 2. They charge, but as they do here, you can imagine, I think both drivers trying to be patient with one another and not trying to go for a mass scramble in terms of battle, for the simple reason that right now they are 2 seconds clear of the pursuing pack, and if they start to battle hard, then we could have Carr, Schink, Bauer, Achatella, Bajulas and Abrams all into a fight, which they do not want to be part of. They want this to be a 2-way fight for the win come the finish as they head down towards turn number 5, and as they do, rolling the way into the tricky right hand here, you can see Lauzon, the car almost breaking away with him there as he made his way into the braking zone with a rear brake bias of about 40%, and as he makes his way out to the corner, it is the case that Lauzon's starting to drop time. As a bit further back, Robert Abrams here continuing to gain, and now he's going after Achatella, who lost the place earlier on in that lap to Bajulas as they make the way to the timeline. A bit further back there, you can see how it is the case. We have Corey Fluke, who's gained multiple places, but he's under pressure here from Gus Blondell, who goes up the inside, and the Blue Flag Motorsports driver gets the move done, or does he, as Fluke now will try to get the cutback momentum up towards turn number 2. He looks the inside into 2, but he has to back out. The Audi just does not have the pace into the corner on such a short straight by comparison with the Elantra, and therefore Corey Fluke now trying to defend versus Daniel Sedino behind him in this battle for P11 as they roll the way out of 3 into 4. No change right now, but speaking of changes, we've got Daniel Smith here trying to recover, going round the outside of Fernando Takahashi through 3 on the inside of 4, almost taking to the gravel there. He's got to be careful of those track limits, of course, and as they make the way out of turn number 4 in the charge to 5, we can see that Fernando Takahashi being passed there by Smith, and Daniel Smith, of course, having to come back with a vengeance now, given the fact he was involved in that contact on the opening lap, and not a happy Veloster driver, no doubt about that, for Torque Steer Racing, as he makes his way out to turn 6. And indeed, one of the drivers who's really been caught up in a lot of bad luck this season so far, and he will want that luck to turn. But as we look from them at 2 at the battle for P10, it is the case of Gus Blondell here holding on for the time being, but behind, look at this, Corey Fluke having to defend versus Daniel Sedino here. The Audi driver definitely feeling the pressure as we ride on board the gearbox here. The 999 driver, we always get a face full of the Elantra grill there as they make the way through 2 and into 3, and as they do, it is the case of Fluke having to really work the car hard, coming out of 3 and into 4. We're only 5 minutes in, and you can see it's the case that we're going to have a look at a move on the inside into turn number 5 by Daniel Sedino as they head into the braking zone here. Fluke's not going to give it up. He's going to go for the cutback as he tries to get the momentum, but he just misses that inside line for turn number 6. He has to wait his turn as they come out of the corner and head to the end of the lap, but Fluke here just will not have the beans in the run up towards turn number 1. Here he's got all the motivation in the world, but the Audi's just not giving him enough enough to get back alongside as they make their way up towards the corner, and Daniel Sedino gets the move done for P11. And now next up on the attack in this is Aaron Lahr, who right now will be thinking, okay, well, if it's the case that one Elantra can do it, I can do it as well. And he of course has come all the way from P20 on the grid up to P13 already. Meanwhile, further back we can see that Daniel Smith continuing to charge through the field. His next target is his teammate Matt Shepka here, and I can imagine they'll both be on the radio right now with the team manager to say, look, we need to switch the cars. If it is the case, they plan to do that. Because Shepka really struggling for pace right now, and I think that is a paradigm of the Honda Civic Type R here today. It is the case it's really struggling for pace compared to the Veloster, and you can see how it, and now, right now, Daniel Smith having to look at the move, but Travis Hall goes early here. But I think he's gone a little bit too early and had to come onto the brakes very early for turn number 5, otherwise he would have straight lined across the corner, I think speared his way into the Veloster in front of him. And meanwhile, that means now Casey Nemitz will go on the offensive here, and Nemitz getting a face full of the Veloster coming out the final corner. Can't really use a draft assisted pass here, will have to do it based on guts and bravery into the corner of turn number 1. But he'll go on the brakes later, of course, with the Civic's advantage on the brakes, but on that inside line, he backs out there. Understandable, given how tight the apex run is into turn number 1, with the depression in the road as well. But meanwhile, we look from them to the battle for P7 here, and it is the case that Robert Abrams is being made to work for it as he goes on the inside in turn number 4, up the inside of Wes Achatella, up into turn number 5, and as they make the way into the right-hander here, well, can Abrams get it done? He shuts the door there, pulls in front of his rival, and I think at this point Achattella's more worried about the fact that he's only got Justin Rhodes between himself and Auguste Blondel, and Auguste Blondel has had to really recover after an awful start to his race as they make their way to the timeline once again. That's 8 laps complete. They go on to lap number 9 and they reach the halfway point of this race. Brilliant racing action so far. We've still got plenty to go here in Sprint Heat 1 as they make their way into the right-hander at turn number 1 once again. But as they do, definitely the case of Robert Abrams, after an awful qualifying session for him, looking to come back strong and already gaining 5 places, and still I think he's got more on the cards here as his next target, Jerome Bajulas, is right now caught in a neck-and-neck battle with David Bauer here for P5, and they are only heading one way, and it's backwards into the clutches of the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver behind. But as they make their way through, we look here to Casey Nemitz versus Travis Orr, battling for what is P16. Horror on the inside there in turn number 2. He'll be on the outside for turn number 3, and Fernando Takahashi trying to get into this fight in the Audi behind. He has to take the popcorn seat view right now and watch as a spectator, but Nemitz has to back out there in the run out 3 and 4 to get the charge up towards 5, and you can see here Fernando Takahashi trying to find a way into this mix, but he just does not have the legs on that Audi right now. The car just will not give him the momentum he needs to try and make the move into turn 5. He has to wait instead as they head down the hill into 6. As they roll their way into the right-hander, it is the case that Takahashi here trying to find a way on through, not able to at this point in time. But meanwhile, we look from them to Shepka, who right now a bit further up the road in P14 still has his teammate Smith behind him. The two Talksteer Racing teammates are definitely going racing right now, and I think Daniel Smith will be required to really send it if he's going to go for the move here. Of course, they won't take one another out, but I think they're both enjoying the racing, as in fact Shepka leaves the door open there, and I think the word has gone through in the end to let Smith pass, because it is the case that Smith will be able to charge on. But indeed a difficult day for Matt Shepka, but at the same time he's continuing to fight on here, and that's what it's all about in motorsport. As meanwhile we look from them back to our top 10, and we look to our race leader in particular, Micah Hendricks, who after losing the lead of this race at the start to John Lauzon, he's now back into the lead after passing Lauzon about 4 laps ago, and James Carr has found his way off camera past John Lauzon for P2. The breakfast for dinner driver here charging on, and in terms of those relative lap times, it is the case that Micah Hendricks is the fastest driver on circuit right now, as we're hearing that Daniel Smith has had a major moment out on circuit and has to jump to the pit, and it sounds as though it may be a retirement from Daniel Smith in race number 1 here today. But meanwhile, with John Lauzon in that P3 position here, our top 3 have definitely broken away from the rest of the field, and then it is the battle for P4, albeit I would say it's the battle for P4, but I think Franz Washing has done the same, which is broken away off into the distance, and further back with Robert Abrams definitely on a tear right now, trying to hunt down the top 6 here. But look at this, Conachatella keeping as close as possible as we ride on board here with the Delta driver in the 55 car, and he's got the pressure on him. Of course, he wants to try and take the fight to Abrams, and I think you will recognise right now he is chasing the overall championship leader, and indeed the man with a plan, the man to be, and it is not phasing him whatsoever. And we love this when we see a driver who is a rookie to the series going on the full charge and really trying to find his way to go up against the very best. And as he makes his way up into turn number 2 right now, the 55 driver doing everything possible, because of course he's got in his mind the fact that Rhodes is just behind him, Justin Rhodes, who we can't see on camera of course, as the cameras inside the car are not positioned correctly so we can see in the rear view mirror, but I can assure you that Justin Rhodes is behind. In fact, we get a gearbox camera here, and that is Justin Rhodes in P9, and then the guy behind is the one who is worrying Achitella right now, which is Auguste Blondel, who has been showing this tenacity to close that gap in the pace between the two of them round after round ever since Alta Park. And right now that delta in pace is negligible, and that means effectively that Auguste Blondel here today could really take the fight on for being the #1 driver in the Delta class. And that's what we're waiting to see, whether Blondel, after that dismal race start that dropped him all the way from P3 to P11 on the opening lap, whether he can get himself back into that fight as they charge their way through the opening corner. Indeed, this bottom end of the top 10 starting to get closer and closer on circuit and really up in the ante. But as they roll the way into turn 2 once more, we do look from them to a bit further back to Aaron Lahr here, who right now in P13 is chasing after Corey Fluke, and Corey Fluke showing no signs of weakness right now beyond the nature of that Audi RS3. He's definitely keeping Aaron Lahr in place and making Lahr have to work for this. Talks to the racing driver, having to go on the offensive. I do apologise earlier, I did refer to Aaron Lahr as a breakfast for dinner driver, and I think it's just the colour in the car that confused my brain a little bit, but it is the case. He makes his way out to turn 4 and up towards 5. Right now, Corey Fluke, the privateer here, definitely showing what he's got, battling for that P12 position as they make their way through the right-hander of 5 and down towards 6. But as they head up through the right-hander here, on towards another lap, only 3 minutes plus the final lap to go here. We've got about 4 more laps in the tank, and it is the case that Micah Hendricks, our race leader, is going to continue to lead our drives on through with an advantage of 1.6 seconds off camera. But meanwhile, Corey Fluke here holding to the outside. Aaron Lahr going up the inside. I think Fluke decided not to battle this, given the fact that it is an Alpha driver and he's aware he's not battling with the Alpha driver, albeit they are in the same overall championship. But Corey Fluke here, I think, recognising it's better to lose one place than battle hard and potentially lose another one to Matt Shepka at the end of this race. But meanwhile, we look from them to what is here to Robert Abrams, who is still in this P7 position. It is the case that Abrams in a difficult place in this race right now. He's not able to break away from the pack behind, and he's struggling to close up to Pajulas in front. And that gap of 1.3 seconds is not going anywhere. It's staying stationary right now. And as a result, I think Abrams at this point needs to focus more on consolidating this finishing position. And of course, we do have the question. I believe it was Francois Schenk, unless I'm mistaken, who was involved in that contact earlier on with, well, it was the case, I think it was Daniel Smith, unless I'm very much mistaken. In fact, I may be mistaken. I think it may have been John Lauzon. No, I think actually it was Schenk, although don't trust me on that, ladies and gentlemen. It is the case, it was either Schenk or Lauzon. It was one of the Beaver Buzz cars that was involved in that contact with Daniel Smith. There could be a post-race penalty applied, and that could be a major time penalty. So right now, I think Abrams may also be thinking about that as they make their way out to turns 3 and 4. But Schenk definitely on the charge here as he makes his way up the hill in towards turn number 5 for what is one of the last times. Not too many more laps to go. 2 more laps left here in race number 1 at the Red Bull Ring National as our drivers come charging on through, and Schenk having to try and keep David Bauer at bay with the time that is remaining as he heads on round. But as he does at this point, heading on to another lap, heading on to the penultimate lap, you can see there David Bauer staying very close as they head on through. And speaking of staying close, when we look to our battle for P2, and you can see that James Carr, after getting ahead of John Lauzon, it is the case that Lauzon is gradually coming back, inching ever closer. And can Lauzon find a way to get on through with the limited time available, or will it not be the case? And what I can confirm, by the way, that contact was between Francois Schenk and what was Daniel Smith on the opening lap. So definitely, I think Schenk may be mindful there could be a post-race time penalty applied if the stewards feel that way about what happened, and it's reported accordingly, and that could be an upset to Beaver Buzz Energy's result in race number 1. But as we see James Carr here rolling his way through the right-hander of turn number 6, they go on to the final lap as led by Micah Hendricks here, and our top 3 is inching together little by little, and you can see Hendricks in fact being made to fall backwards slightly here to the battle for P2. I think if he keeps his lap on the straight and narrow, he will be safe. But speaking of keeping on the straight and narrow, here is David Bauer here, who has to try and look up the inside of Schenk into turn 1. Schenk's going to give him the room, but it's very close, and Bauer goes all in on the brakes there. He gets the move done initially, now it's the drag away. Oh, goodness me! And Schenk in the contact there with David Bauer. Will David Bauer be absolutely fuming with that contact? As meanwhile, as we look from them, from one of the breakfast for dinner drivers who's been in the wars to another one who finds himself on the verge of a war with Viva Buzz Energy driver. James Carr having to hold off. Where's John Lauzon behind him? But Micah Hendricks in front, doing enough to stay alive in the lead of this race. And as they make the way through the final corner, I think he's going to be safe. Because as he charges to the timeline, it will be Micah Hendricks who takes the win for Blue Flag Motorsports here in race number 1 at the Red Bull Ring National, ahead of James Carr, followed by John Lauzon P3, and it will be Jerome Bajulas who beats Francois Schinck to the line, P4, Schinck P5, Abrams P6, then Connor Achatella P7 taking the win in the Delta class, ahead of Justin Rhodes P8, Auguste Blondel P9, Daniel Sedano P10 completing that top 10, and then it will be Aaron Lahr who comes home P11, ahead of Corey Fluke P12, Matt Shepka P13, Travis Hall will come on home P14 in the end, and it will be Casey Nemitz P15, Giovanni Romano P16 after a difficult race for Romano, David Bauer P17, Fernando Takashi P18, and then Spencer Cockayne will be the last driver to finish on the lead lap in P19, ahead of Jesse Bodas and Logan McKenzie and Daniel Smith. But as Cockayne completes his race, it is the case that indeed a number of drivers coming together right at the end of the race, and now we get ready for race number 2 immediately. We've got no pulls, we go straight into another race, and of course this one will be a top 4 reverse grid, and as the grid is gradually being populated here, we do look to the blimp camera, which isn't very actually well placed here, so we may actually try to get to the heli camera if we can get the feed to the helicopter camera. Indeed, we do have the heli camera right now, and the heli camera just positioned behind the start finish straight, and all our drivers are making their way onto that grid, and well, of course, absolute drama towards the end. But with Schinck finishing in P4, he will be starting on pole, and any penalties of course will be applied post race given that contact we saw, and in particular, well, one very frustrated driver will be our driver of Bauer, who was in that major contact. But with Schinck starting on that pole, it will not be long before we get racing once again. But goodness me, it was intense in race number 1. I think race number 2 is only going to continue in that fashion, as all our drivers get ready to go racing. And well, as we do wait here, I think the gridding process is complete, and now we wait for the green. And it's lights out, and away we go for race number 2 here at Red Bull Ring National as they make the way up towards turn 1. And immediately Jerome Bajulas getting the better launch off the line. James Carr, meanwhile, also looking for the move here into turn 1 on Schinck, getting his elbows out nice and early. And you see Robert Abrams here versus Micah Hendricks as they make the way out to the corner. And Robert Abrams here is not letting this go as they go into turn 2. He's going to try and go all the way around the outside on cold tyres here in that Elantra. Now this is brave, but that's why he's your championship leader, and he's still there just about into turn 3. But Hendricks says, you've had enough, I'm closing the door, and Abrams backs out accordingly. And as they all make the way through the open S sequence, it is the case all drives safely on through as we see Giovanni Romano here in the battle of Aaron Lahr coming out of 4 and up towards 5 they go. And in the charge, Romano's going to stay on the inside line here to try and hold on to the position as he gets his nose ahead for P12. But look at that, David Bauer, who was all the way at the back after that last lap incident in race number 1. He's already up to P13. David Bauer is not pulling any punches, and we see going very slowly to the back there Spencer Cockayne as they make the way across that timeline and onto lap number 2 already. But meanwhile, we look from them up towards our leaders, and Achatella here holding on to that P6 and out. Auguste Blondel going on the offensive, and Corey Fluke had an absolute blinder a start up to P8, but he's now falling down the order gradually, as it is the case. Everybody getting up to speed, and Fluke looking defenceless here as they make the way through to, and Shepka's going to be brave to go around the outside, but to be fair, the Honda can do it, and he moves up into P10. He falls behind Fluke. However, he hasn't got the speed coming out of the corner, but Shepka definitely looking racy. Indeed, our Honda drivers have almost come alive in this race and are really trying to pull those points early. I think they recognise they've got to strike while the tyres are warm, given the fact that the Honda's tyres do come up to temperature much faster compared to their peers, and they've got to capitalise on that whilst they've got a moment. Oh, goodness me, and behind. Blondel and Shepka in contact, but oh, goodness me, this is going to lead to 4 wide behind, as that is Lahr, Bauer, also Romano and Nemitz, and oh, goodness me, and behind them as well is John Lauzon, and as they all head up towards turn 1, well, don't blink, ladies and gentlemen, you won't want to miss this. It's effectively almost 7 wide into turn 1, and as they make their way through, they all survive going into the corner, and Aaron Lahr right now must be thinking to himself, well, thankfully I was at the head of that pack and I'm safe. As meanwhile, David Bauer tries to hold off Auguste Blondel here, as we see Shepka pushed a little bit wide and just about keeps it off the grass. They're all bringing the elbows out. It's touring car racing. We love to see it, little bumps between the cars. That's what it's all about. as they make their way through turns 3 and 4, and as they head up towards turn number 5 right now, Gus Blondell is not giving in. He's got his teammate Sedino on the inside here. Now, which one of them's going to back out? If either of them, they've also got behind them their team, well, in fact, they've got Romano just behind them as well, and in front of them there, they've got Lauzon, who's trying to make daylight robbers. Sedino versus Blondell, and Sedino goes wide as they make the way down the start-finish straight here, and Sedino involved in that contact, and I think he won't be too pleased with his teammates. Meanwhile, Giovanni Romano trying to get into that mix here, and the 337 driver saying, well, if you two can't sort it out between you, I'll take both the places off of you. But it's the case, he gets out broken into turn number 1 on the inside line, a bit of a tap to the rear quarter panel of Blondell as they head up in towards turn number 2. I think Giovanni Romano at this point realising I've got to be very firm to make a pass here at the Red Bull Ring, and we'd love to see it, but we don't love to see that. Casey is getting a bit too hot on the brakes and into the wall, being turned with the contact, and has to wait to reverse the car back onto that circuit. But meanwhile, we look from Casey Nimitz to our race leader here, Jerome Bajulas, having started on what was that first row, of course. It is the case he rolls his way through the right-hander of turn number 6, heading on towards another lap. Bajulas right now under pressure from Shink and Abrams, of course, making that fast start up to P3 already. He's now going to look to go for P2 here as they head towards the timeline and up towards turn number 1 on the inside. It's the yellow flag motorsports driver, and as they roll it in on the brakes here, well, I think Robert Abrams is only going one way, and that way is up the field as he gains P2 after Francois Shink, his rival in the championship. And as they head into turn number 2, rolling in on the brakes, it is the case they stay as they are now. There's no change back here. Shink stays in position. As they roll the way out of the S's, they look towards turn number 5 in due course, and behind them we can see that Connor Achatella here getting stuck in amongst the Alpha drivers is the Delta in that P5 position. Corey Fluke meanwhile, and credit to Fluke has to be given here. Corey Fluke has not had a nice task, as we hear it is the case that Fernando Takahashi has had to, well, he's had a bit of a disconnect to his issue. I thought he jumped to the pits there, and that's the case. We just briefly lost him in terms of his connection, but Corey Fluke, having started within the breach of that top 10, a brilliant start and running in P8 right now, and David Bauer into the pit lane. I would imagine that is for contacts, and therefore it's a try-free penalty for David Bauer, who started all the way from towards the back of the grid. It's not going his way, but Corey Fluke definitely pushing well onto that P8 position. John Lauzon meanwhile trying to go for the move versus Aaron Lahr into turn 1. He's up the inside here, and Lauzon gets the move done, and Aaron Lahr does not fight it too hard. I think Aaron Lahr realises that Lauzon is a little bit faster by comparison, and instead needs to work with Lauzon to gain time on the top 8. That's the way to do it. There's more points out there if they work together, and indeed it is the case. Lab Mob there in the YouTube chat saying that's peak racing right there, in reference to what was the 3x3 wide, or what we like to refer to as the almost 7 wide moment into turn number 1 moments ago. It is peak racing, but to be fair, Alpha Touring Challenge is delivering again in season 5, and well, it is the case. We've had so many highlights this season, and every time I've walked away from looking at one of these rounds, it is the case I want to say that was my favourite round, and each round continues to impress as we look back here to our P2 driver Robert Abrams, who right now, of course, the championship leader after a difficult race number 1, is looking to try and get on that top step of the podium come the end of race number 2. He's only got one more driver between him and that aspiration. Meanwhile, further back here in P14, it's a Gus Blondell up the inside for P14 versus Travis Hoare. Travis Hoare on the outside line there, but you can see Logan McKenzie now trying to get into the fight, and he's going to make it 3 wide in the charge towards turn number 2. McKenzie on the inside, Blondell in the middle, and Hoare on the outside here. They go in 3 wide, but how do they emerge? Well, I can imagine it's going to be the case. They all start to go line astern, but look at this. Fernando Takahashi says, I want in on this. Well, he gets a little bit of a door up there to Travis Hoare, but there's no way for him to get on through, and indeed he has to back out. But as we ride on board here with Fernando Takahashi, he's gone in the offensive versus the 67 driver in the run to turn 5. As they come rolling into the braking zone here for the right-hander, the 998 driver definitely showing his fangs, but those fangs, of course, how much menace have they got in them, given that Audi just does not have the pace as they roll the way through the final corner. And we're hearing that Robert Abrams has found its way past Jerome Bajulas for the lead of this race, but meanwhile, with the battling going on here further down, it is the case, battles up and down the field, and we look to Logan McKenzie here, who continues to be pressured by Gus Blondell for P14, but meanwhile, your leaders, here are your leaders, and that is Robert Abrams now, who is at the head of this pack after making the move into turn 1 off camera only a moment ago. Jerome Bajulas behind here, but it is indeed the case that the top 6, I kid you not, are separated by only 1.2 seconds right now as they all roll their way through turn number 5 and into 6. This is brilliant racing action between the 6 drivers, going all the way from Abrams down to Carr. Justin Rhodes is a further 1.6 seconds back and having to play witness to this, but indeed any one of these 6 drivers can win this race right now. And if you're Robert Abrams, the pressure is on to try and hold on to that lead as we see that Micah Hendricks looking up the inside for P4, going past Achatella as they head on to turn number 2 here. We briefly saw in the rear view mirror situation, but as they make the way into turn number 2, all 6 of these drivers definitely getting very feisty, but of course each and every move they make in amongst this pack, as we see a bit of contact there between Hendricks and Achatella. Hendricks not pulling any punches as they make the way through turn 3 and up into 4, and you can imagine it means a lot. It's personal for Hendricks as well, missing what was the round at Monza, losing some major points potentially in the 473 driver, who we know is absolutely staggeringly fast in that Veloster. We saw it at Fuji Speedway, absolutely untouchable to an extent. But meanwhile, into the pits comes James Carr. I think that's a drive-through penalty for instant points, and James Carr's race now takes a turn for the worse as he has to come in and serve that drive-through penalty. But we still have what is 5 drivers competing for the race win here as they make the way up towards turn number 1, and we can see that Drone Padulas taking a little bit of a peek to the inside, but he can't quite find anything at the moment. He's trying to fathom out an opportunity. We've only just cleared the halfway point of this race. I don't know what's going to last longer, my voice or the battle for the top position through these 5 drivers, but regardless, we'll fight on. And as they make the way through turns 2 and 3 right now in the snake train of 5 cars, it is the case you can imagine all of them will be thinking it's like a chess game right now. They're all waiting for somebody to get it wrong, and then they can potentially capsize and pick up not at least 1 but 2 or even 3 places if you are, for example, Hendricks in P4. And that's what you've got to do, and Padulas here is starting to show signs of needing to scratch an itch. And what kind of itch is that, I hear you ask? Well, that's the itch for the lead of the race as we ride on board here with Padulas. He comes out the final corner and Abrams goes defensive to the middle of the road. He knows the pressure is on as they make the way down towards turn number 1 here, and as they head up the hill, Abrams on the inside going defensive. Padulas has got his nose ahead on the outside line. Abrams is not backing out here, he's got to go defensive, but as they do it causes the back to bunch up. And as they make the way down towards turn number 2, Padulas defends the inside with Shink on his rear. Rolling their way through turn number 2. You can see Shink having to hold that inside to outside line as Hendricks there literally hugging the door of Shink and saying, well, don't mind if I do a little bit of the elbow coming out there from Hendricks and up to P3. That forces Shink a little bit wide at turn number 3. And as they make the way through 4 and up towards 5, now it's the case that Hendricks is in P3 as they make the way into turn number 5 here. It's classic, and this is what you've got to expect in touring car. It is the case they will rub doors, elbows will come out. There's no malice intended. It's the case that fighting for position, and as they roll the way out to turn number 6, 5 minutes still to go plus the final lap of this race, and as they charge up towards the timeline, you can see now Abrams doing a little bit of a duck and weave in the run towards turn number 1. He knows it's the case he's not breaking away from this pack. He has got to hold on for each and every lap as they make the way through turn number 2. Meanwhile, further turn number 1 I should say, and up towards turn number 2, but meanwhile further back, Giovanni Romano, who we talked about earlier, getting up to P10. He's now in the charge of P9 versus Aaron Lai. He's got Corey Fluke in front of him, and to be fair, Fluke is definitely starting to fall backwards this battle for P9, but at the same time the privateer is giving it his all. He knows that a P8 is like a win here today if he can pull it off, as we hear that John Lauzon is having some connectivity issues. Say it's not so, that's a retirement for John Lauzon, because if so the stakes will only become higher for the drivers behind. I think it is a disconnection for John Lauzon. He's dropping down our timing tower, but meanwhile as we look here from the battle for what is now P7 with Lauzon, we believe retiring due to a disconnection. That's the equivalent of an engine failure. We cut back to our leaders. They make way to lap number 13. It's Abrams on the outside, Padulas on the inside. Micah Hendricks is giving Padulas the push into turn 1. And as they roll away from the right hand, and no, we have Lauzon back, we can confirm it, that Hendricks is pushing on here. He's trying to make it that the 2 of them come on through versus Abrams, but Abrams is having none of it as they make the way up into 2. They roll the way through the right hand here, and you can see Abrams has to finally back out, but as they do, Achatella here up the inside of Shink, and he's on the outside into 3. He's going to have to back out once again. As they roll the way out of the corner, it is the case that Achatella, I should say, right now having to tuck back in, and Justin Rhodes at this point I think is thinking, hello guys, I've been away for a little while, did you miss me? Because he's now in this fight as well. He's onto the back of Achatella here. It's a 6-way fight once again for the lead of this race. We've still got 3 minutes to go. That's approximately 4 more laps unless my estimation's incorrect, and as Padulas leads, Hendricks in P2 leads to a trying to break away, and I think Robert Abrams at this point might be struggling a little bit as they head on to lap number 14. But as they roll the way into turn number 1, you can imagine one small mistake could see Pajulas and Hendricks drop right back into the thick of it. Meanwhile, speaking of the thick of it, here is the thick of it in the battle for P8. And indeed, it is the case that Romano, as we ride on board with him, has now closed up to the back of Aaron Lahr, who in turn has closed up to the back of Fluke. Behind Romano is Sedano for what is P11. And as they roll the way into turn number 2, any mistakes here could mean an absolute disaster in terms of losing not just 1 but up to 3 places if you're Corey Fluke. And Corey Fluke right now under huge pressure, and Romano could see his target, but can he get close enough to go for the move? That is the question. No, he can't at the moment, but he's got to just believe that at some point a mistake will be made by someone in front, or he can just extract a little bit more pace as they roll the way into turn number 5. As they roll the way through the right hand here, we look back to Spencer Cockayne, who's just found his way past Fernando Takahashi for P17 as these two make the way up towards turn 5 as well. There's battles up and down the field, but meanwhile up at the top of the field, Robert Abrams in P3 is going defensive into turn 1. I think Abrams has taken too much out of the car too soon because he's not able to keep the pace of the leaders, and it does seem as though the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver here is struggling as they make the way through to, once again, they've only got 3 more laps including this one. And right now Abrams is having to battle for 3rd place. He's putting up a stoic defence, there's no doubt about that. And of course, who's he defending against? Nobody other than his main championship rival, and that's why the stakes could not be higher right now, because if Shink can find his way on past, he will gain points on Abrams in this race. As they make the way through turn number 5 and into 6, you can imagine that Majulas and Hendricks right now be thinking about battling on that final lap. They won't be battling immediately, they'll want to try and put as much time distance between themselves and this pack of hungry wolves that are battling for P3, and I compare them to wolves because their appetite is absolutely ferocious and they are clawing for those points as they make the way through turn number 1 here. And as they roll the way through the corner, I think it's the case the Beaver Buzz driver Francois Shink would say, actually I'm a beaver, not a wolf, but regardless it's semantics as they make the way up into 2. And Bajulas right now who leads as they head their way through the penultimate lap with less than a minute to go. They'll have one more after this. It is the case that Corey Fluke meanwhile battling for P8 as they roll the way through the right-hander here. He's having to hold on, and he makes it so that Romano tries to come from the inside to outside and turn number 3. And as they make the way out of 3 and into 4 here, you can see Romano and Lahr going toe-to-toe, and behind them, that's Daniel Sedino who's trying to come through with Romano here. He's trying to make it a 2-for-way 1 pass as they make the way down towards turn number 5. And as they do, Sedino on the inside of Aaron Lahr, he gets the move hooked up here as our leaders go on to the final lap. And as they do here, our drivers behind who we're focusing on will be going on to that final lap as well now. And can Corey Fluke hold on to P8 come the finish? He's got one more lap of defending to do in the Audi that could, and can he pull it off here in the 999 car? Romano says I'm going for it early, but he's thinking about it. No, he backs off there. I think it was more of a dummy rather than an intended move as they make the way out of turn number 1. They make the way towards turn number 2. The battle for the leader continues as well, but it's slightly off camera, but Romano they're not able to make the move into 2. Meanwhile, we cut to our leader, and that is Jerome Bajulas here, who as he makes his way over the crest, it is the case he's not got long to go. He can't afford to make any mistakes through the final 2 corners here. He clears turn number 5. He gets it spot on. One more corner between him and victory as he makes his way through the right-hander. He gets it hooked up, and as he charges to the line, it's Beaver Buzz's Jerome Bajulas who takes the win in race number 2 ahead of Micah Hendricks. Then Robert Abrams completes the overall podium. Francois Shink P4, Con Atratella P5 taking the Delta win. Justin Rhodes P6, John Lowes on P7, and Corey Fluke in a drag race to the line just holds off Giovanni Romano for P8, Romano P9, Daniel Sedino P10, Aaron Lahr P11, Matt Shepka P12, and it's Logan McKenzie P13 ahead of James Carr P14, Auguste Blondel P15, Travis Hall P16, Spencer Cockayne P17 ahead of Fernando Takahashi, Casey Nemitz P19 as he crosses the line, and then it is Jesse Boda's P20 completing all of our tries to finish on the lead lap. With David Bow there, P21 in the pit lane. I think that may have been a retirement, and indeed we did not have what was in the end Fedorowski taking it to the grid, and Daniel Smith, I think, with that retirement, I think there was an issue with the car, and he did not make it to the grid either. But my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, would you believe the racing we have just had over the first 2 races? And indeed, the great news is we've got one more race to come. It'll be the sprint feature, and it will be in approximately 5 minutes' time. We bring you that build-up to the race. We'll be back very shortly, ladies and gentlemen, but when we do, well, Races 1 and 2 have been an absolute spectacle, and our drivers need 10 minutes to cool down. We need a brief moment to cool down. And what's going to happen in that sprint freak race? It's going to, of course, be a top 8 reverse. It will be Corey Fluke who starts on pole position. And how can he hold on to that position? Given his defensive nuance, could he potentially take a win in the Delta class? Indeed, what is going to happen? We'll be back very soon to find out all that and much more. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, as we return then for the build-up to what is the final race of today here in round 6 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 5, as brought to you at the Red Bull Ring National, we should say. It is the case we have had two absolute nail-biters of races so far. It was the case that in qualifying, we saw Micah Hendricks take pole position in great fashion and stylistic fashion on his return to the series. But indeed, that pole only redeeming part of the point in the fact that in Sprint Heat 1, we saw brilliant battling up and down the field. And in Sprint Heat number 2 that immediately followed, with that top 4 reverse grid, it was the case. Our drivers came on even stronger, and the battling was to only intensify. Whether it was in the midfield, at the front of the field, or anywhere in between, there was no stopping the action. And so much so that you have to wonder what is going to happen in the sprint feature race, which is only a couple of minutes away. And indeed, as we inch ever closer to 8:45 this evening, British Summer Time or UTC +1, it will be the case. So all our drivers will begin at one last-ditch attempt, including Micah Hendricks here, as our drivers are in their brief warm-up break period of 10 minutes here. Only 2 minutes of it left on the clock. It is the case that Hendricks will be looking to end his night on a high. Indeed, many of them will. But the big question will be whether Achatella could take the fight to Corey Fluke, because of course Achatella is in the middle of that top 8 reverse, whereas Corey Fluke, as we're to understand it, who took P8 in race number 2 by a hair's width at a photo finish essentially with Giovanni Romano, we believe that Fluke will be on pole, and therefore Achatella will have to chase down his Delta rival and try to take the win. But it's not just about those two. Indeed, there are so many stories out there to be told. We've also got breakfast for dinners, drivers of David Bauer, Justin Rhodes and many others who are all trying to fight for major points after difficult races of their own. It is going to be an absolute thriller, and Justin Rhodes in particular will be thinking about what can he do in order to add to his success already today. Well, it's going to be a question that can only be answered in one way, and that is through the actual circuit. But indeed, if you are in the chat right now and tune in, do let us know what's been your favourite moment so far. For me personally, it's got to be that 6-way battle for the lead of the race, all the way to the finish in that sprint race number 2, or sprint heat 2 as we like to refer to it. It was the case. It could have gone any way, but in the end, Jerome Bajulas picking up that win in brilliant style, and Bajulas picking up some major points and buffeting his championship campaign. But whoa, it's going to be one of those ones now where can Bajulas come from what will be a P8 in the field and make his way back to make it back-to-back wins? Could he at least be back on the podium? We have seen normally the top 8 reverse has led to some very interesting and different battles from what we're used to seeing, particularly drivers who start towards what is the back end of that top 8. If they have poor starts, they fall back into the clutches of the drivers outside of the top 10 who really do want those major points. Indeed, everybody's battling for points, but when you start, say, P12 or P13 and you haven't benefited from a reverse grid at any point, that's where you really want to try and capitalise on those who have those slow starts. And Travis Hoare in particular, we have seen Travis Hoare have some fantastic starts in that midfield pack. Can he have another great start here as we get ready to head into race number 3? Very shortly, our drivers will be jump back to the pits, and when they do, they'll then start to make their way to the final grid. As that final grid is now being formulated, we'll very shortly be transferring the camera over to the grid as our drivers begin to line up. Indeed, we see Casey Nemitz here, who will be started further down the grid compared to others. And unfortunately, we can't quite see Nemitz there, briefly jumping back to the pit lane. But we do look to the blimp camera here, which is in the right position right now. And we can see there it is confirmed. That is Corey Fluke, who will be taking his maiden pole position in this series right on the front row. And, well, what is going through Corey Fluke's mind right now? You have to imagine, but to be fair, Corey Fluke should be really proud of how he's performed so far, and indeed, it is a huge opportunity here. If he can have a good start to this race, I don't think he's going to be finishing as the race winner, although then again, I'm not going to put him down, but it is the case he could pick up a major score here to wrap up what has been a brilliant day of racing for the privateer in the Audi RS3, and he's definitely proven the Audi's got more than meets the eye. Alongside him on that front row, however, is John Lauzon as we await the lights. And it's lights out and away we go for the final time today at the Red Bull Ring Nationals. All our drivers get up to his first and second gear and charge up towards turn 1. And you can see in the rear picture, Matt Shepard getting a good start there. But meanwhile, we can see Achatella going in the offensive into turn 1, trying to make multiple passes and up to P3 there as they head all the way down towards turn number 2. And as they roll the way on the brakes, so you can see it is the case that Justin Rhodes trying to battle around the outside. And as they do roll in the way through turn number 2, Giovanni Romano behind also getting a good start. start here, of course, starting P9, but immediately going on the offensive versus Micah Hendricks, who's fallen a long way back. Hendricks having a very sloppy start by comparison with what we've typically seen from the 473 driver, but now he's getting himself back up to speed, and as he does, it is the case he's going hunting, as meanwhile Robert Abrams defending to the inside into turn number 5, and as he rolls his way on through, the number 14 driver here doing everything he can in order to be able to go hunting after a potential win. But already John Lauzon takes the lead of the race on the exit of turn number 1, and as they make their way across the timeline, now Achatella will be the next driver to have Fluke in his sights, and this is personal. This is in the Delta class. Achatella immediately going very late on the brakes. In fact, I think Fluke lifting off a little bit, braking very early, and I think Fluke at this point is more thinking about just trying to get some points on the board and not defending too hard. As you can see, Shink going up the inside as well. And it's going to be too wide between the Delta drivers here with Achatella going up the inside into turn number 2, and this will give Fluke the inside into 3. He can defend nicely versus Shink here, and as they roll the way out of the corner, Mike Hendricks trying to get into this fight as they roll around. In fact, we've got Hendricks running onto the gravel there, and he'll lose a lot of momentum. I think he will be asked to give a slowdown time penalty, and indeed he does have to give the time back. Meanwhile, further back here we can see Casey Nemitz going on the offensive versus Takahashi in the battle for P16. Nemitz on the inside of your pitch here, Takahashi on the outside. They'll go too wide into the apex of 5, but Nemitz here having the door closed as behind. Spencer Cockayne looks up the inside, but I think it was a little bit fortuitous there to try and go for the move. He can't find it. Instead he has to back out, and Travis Hoare tries to get in on the mix here as they make the way down towards turn number 1. 2 minutes, of course, we've still got plenty of time to go, no pit stops on the cards, and as Travis Hoare looks up the inside here into the opening corner versus Cockayne, Cockayne's going round the outside and gets the move done, and now defends the inside. Indeed, Hoare's going backwards here. Blondell is trying to go round the outside of him into turn 2 in the battle for P19. He can't find it. Jesse Boda's there staying with them as they roll the way on through, but as they make the way through the right into left here, it is the case we look to Micah Hendricks, who after that slowdown is again having to deliver a recovery drive now as they make the way out of 4, and well, Hendricks under major pressure here, and that is Logan McKenzie and Jerome Bajulad's behind. And where did Bajulaz even disappear to at the start? He had a very poor start, much like Hendricks in fact, and lost out massively, and now it's the case that Logan McKenzie, Aaron Lyon, David Bauer all thinking, well, we want a piece of this, thank you very much. As we can see here, it's the case that the battle for P13 rages up towards turn number 1, and well, McKenzie on the outside here, and Aaron Lars not going to back out of this, or is he, as they make the way into the heavy braking zone? Aaron Lars not one for backing out when he's committed. He's going to commit, but he has to come off the throttle there through the apex, otherwise he would take McKenzie for a ride. I don't think McKenzie would appreciate it as they make the way through turn 1 and up into 2, and David Bauer's now thinking, okay, well, if you're not going to make the move, can I make the move on you? But meanwhile, Blondell here again trying to come past what is Travis Hoare, but he can't find it at the moment, and Travis Hoare holding the line. But as they roll the way through the corners here and onwards towards what is turn number 5, we look further up the field here to James Carr, who's under pressure from Matt Shepka, and in fact we ride on board here with Matt Shepka, who in P10, the Talkstick Racing driver, feeling very racy versus James Carr. Now, as they make the way out turn 6, you may be wondering at this point, well, given the fact that race time is double that what we're previously used to, as we see Shep here making his way up towards the corner, I do think that James Carr picked up a slowdown penalty there, as we see Corey Fluke back it off versus what is Daniel Cedino for turn number 1 here, seeing that up to P7, Fluke dropping down to P8. You may be wondering at this point, given the race is double the time distance, how will this change things up? Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pause that fault there, because it's 3 wide between our Delta drivers of Hoare, Takahashi and Nemitz for P17 into turn 1. Nemitz gets the move on the inside, but Takahashi versus Travis Hoare into turn number 2 here is not giving up. It's the case. He's got Hoare over the back of it, and Blondell as well has dropped very far back here, and Jesse Boda's really now starting to go on the charge, and we haven't really talked too much about the 100 driver since the start of today's show, but it is the case. We're seeing the privateer here in the Velocity machine trying to go on the charge and get some points on his rivals as they make their way up into turn number 5. And as they roll the way on through, it is the case they all head through in a line down towards turn number 6. Oh, goodness me! And that is an instant Casey Nemitz. And was there contact there with Fernando Takahashi? It looks so there may have been, as Nemitz there literally parked on pit lane entry, and in fact is going to run through the pit lane, and that is frustration for Nemitz. That will be a long run through the pits, and Jesse Bodas at this point is now under attack by Travis Hoare. As we can see there, I guess Blondell trying to come on through, and our Deltas are definitely loving the race, and it has to be said, as they make their way up into turn number 2, and as they roll the way on into the right hand here, Blondell up the inside. I think at long last he'll finally gain a position for an overtake here in this race. He's had to wait a very long time to make a move, but he's finally made one 5.5 minutes into the 30 minutes. But as they make their way out of the corner, we look back up to Shepka here, who's being passed by Micah Hendricks of P10, and Shepka heads through the right-hander. It is the case, down through the right-hander into turn number 6 now. It is one of those situations where I think Shepka falling backwards a little bit here, does not have the pace of Hendricks, and is having to wait for that opportunity to go on the offensive later on. And speaking of later on, whilst I try to give me a brief breather, what can we expect here with double the time duration of the race? 30 minutes instead of 15 minutes means that we will see the tyres on the cars and the brakes wear down more, particularly those front tyres, and watch out for the fall off of what is the Hyundai Elantras in particular. They will really suffer on their tyres from the 20-minute mark onwards. We've already seen it in the form of what is Robert Abrams towards the end of race number 2, really struggling on those tyres. Given the fact that we've got 30 minutes of racing, the Elantra drivers in general will feel that pain. Meanwhile, the Honda Civics will really come alive in those final 10 minutes, and that's what they'll be praying for. They'll be hoping that everyone else is not able to manage their tyres as well as the Civic, and on paper that would be the case. And Micah Hendricks right now is showing no signs of slowing down, and nor is there Corey Fluke as they make their way through turn 5 and into 6. But Fluke now under pressure from where's Jerome Bajulos here as they head across that timeline very shortly. I think Bajulos here is going to be looking for the move, and I think Corey Fluke's not going to offer up too much of a defence here. I don't think he's really got a defence he can offer on that outside line into one. Bajulos getting comfortably ahead in the run to the turn 1 apex. They emerge, and Shepka now has to try and find a way through for P11. The driver running in P12 at the moment is Matt Shepka for Torque Steer Racing, and he has got Logan McKenzie behind. But meanwhile, further up here, we can see it is the case that Robert Abrams and Francois Schinck again coming to blows as they make the way through turns 3 and 4, and as they head up the hill towards turn number 5 at this point. Well, it is the case. I'm getting a little bit of a feeling here that this is like a Turkington-Sutton rivalry from British Touring Car Championship back in 2021. These two drivers, of course, the main two up there in the championship right now, definitely putting themselves on the stage, and whenever they're together, we do see those elbows coming out those doors being rubbed here as they make their way out of the final corner and up towards turn number 1. And as they charge up the hill, this time it is Schinck who's still ahead for now, but you can imagine that Abrams is not going to let Schinck have this for long. Justin Rhodes rides along behind here in P5, and where can the breakfast of dinner get into the mix as well as they make their way up towards turn number 2? Well, I think Rhodes is going to be patient here as Abrams looks to the inside. He goes very late on the brakes. There's a tap between the two of them once again. Robert Abrams is definitely throwing caution to the wind here. He is going for it, and he gets that P3 as they run out of turn number 3. Through 4 and up towards turn number 5 they go. But as they charge out to turn number 4, it is the case that Francois Schinck at this point is thinking, okay, use your tyres up, I'll come back at you later. Because Schinck right there, I think he put up the defence, but he didn't put up too much of a defence, as much as he could have through turn number 3, for the simple reason he doesn't want to take the life out of the car. And would you believe it, we have already cleared almost 9 minutes of racing here. The time is flying, as are our drivers right now, and we've still got plenty more to come here at the Red Bull Ring National in the final race of today. Meanwhile, further back, we can tell you that Shepka right now battling for P12 and indeed P11 with Corey Fluke. Fluke on the outside there in the Audi. Shepka up the inside. Shepka goes to the move here. He goes late on the brakes into one. That's all he can do in that Honda. He's got to use what it's got to its advantage, which is those absolutely dominant brakes. And as he makes his way into turn number 2, he's got to defend here from Fluke, and also McKenzie, who tries to squeeze on through. Logan McKenzie here makes it two-way with Fluke for the apex of 2. Into 3 they go, and McKenzie's going to hang. Oh, goodness me! And there's a tap there between McKenzie and Fluke. Fluke backing off on the throttle there. Very well done by McKenzie to catch the car. And to be fair, Corey Fluke showing great awareness to stop the car in a gradual manner by lifting off the throttle to make sure that he didn't send McKenzie all the way round. And I think McKenzie will be appreciative of the fact that Fluke didn't just simply send the car into a T-bone. And as they make their way through 5 and into 6, great respectful racing between these guys. And you can tell they're racing hard, but they don't mean to make contact. But when they do, the contact is spectacular, and that's why it's touring car class racing all the way as they make their way across that timeline. Meanwhile, back up in the battle for P3, it is the case that right now Lauzon and Achatella are your leaders, now 1.7 seconds up the road. But meanwhile, we can see a Robert Abrams continuing to have to hold on as they roll the way out to turns 2 and 3. And as they come on through here, Robert Abrams definitely right now feeling the pinch of the pressure. James Carr a little bit further back, however, on the back of Giovanni Romano. And as they head out of turn number 4 and up towards turn 5, James Carr at this point taking a peek to the inside here versus Romano, and immediately getting it done on Romano there. I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say this, just looking stationary in that pass by comparison. And I wonder if Romano there decided to back off the throttle a little bit, knowing that he was eventually going to be passed early on in this race by the Hyundai Elantra of Carr, and later on he will come on back there. But Romano, I think, playing tactics, because it was almost as if he was missing about 10 miles an hour of speed into that braking zone, and as they slide their way on that curve there, interestingly, into turn number 1, you can tell our driver's definitely trying to really throttle the brakes towards the rear in terms of that brake bar, so the car snaking under braking. It is the case that Romano falling back a little bit from James Carr, but I think he does have an ace up his sleeve later on as they roll the way on through here and we complete the first third of this race. We've still got just over 19 minutes to go plus the final lap. Anything can still happen. We are waiting for that late race transition when we see the Elantras in particular start to feel the pain in their tyres compared to the other touring car class cars we have here today, and particularly the Honda Civic drivers should suddenly really hit the pace by comparison. As we see Micah Hendricks, who we ride on board with here, Micah Hendricks clattering his way out to the final corner. And the Blue Flag Motorsports driver, having had that difficult start, having to really try and regain places as he drags his way up the inside here into turn number 1 versus what is Giovanni Romano. And again, Romano there, you could see using the mirror and also the left-hand side window there briefing Micah Hendricks. It was the case that Romano backing out there in the run to turn number 1. I think Giovanni Romano here is playing the long game. It's a very risky game what Romano's doing here in terms of backing out when he has got the other cars coming on through. You know why he's doing it is because of the fact that what he's trying to do is effectively stay with the lead pack. He wants the faster drivers to pull him up to that battle for the lead. But in return, of course, if it is the case that, say, Hendricks, for example, can't stay with Carr, and on top of that, Carr can't stay with Rhodes ahead of him, then what Romano's actually done, he's relegated himself to a battle that's much lower down the field than what he could potentially have battled for early on in the race. So it's risk versus reward, but I would say that Romano has played this one smart as they make their way out to the final corner and onwards towards another lap. But as they do, we look from them to a bit further up the road to Francois Schinck here in P4 as we say hello there to Charisma in the YouTube chat. I hope you're doing well, Charisma. But indeed, it is the case that Francois Schinck right now, that Beaver Buzz livery has a lot of charisma on it, but right now he will not be thinking about the colours of the car. He'll be thinking about defending versus the breakfast for dinner machine of what is there. Justin Rhodes, who tries to go outside to inside through 2 and 3, and Rhodes is going all in here. He's giving it everything because behind him, of course, he does have his teammate of James Carr, and as they make the way out to turn number 4, Rhodes gets the move done, and here comes James Carr in the scramble here. They're trying to make it a 2-for-1 pass on Francois Schinck. Can they get it done? Carr at the inside into 5. He's pushed to the apex. There's contact between the two of them, and Francois Schinck is knocked away there. And I think Carr would argue that he was squeezed, so in the end he put his nose in there, and he had the right to keep it there. And as they make the way out to the final corner, you could tell that Francois Schinck is not a happy man. But right now, the Beaver Buzz driver, he's been in the wars today. And as they make the way up the hill into turn number 1, breakfast for dinner definitely making lunch out of the Beaver Buzz driver as they make the way on towards turn number 2. But I can imagine Francois Schinck will be coming back later on in this race. Do not count him out yet. He will not give up until it's over. But indeed, the battles are pressing on here. And now Justin Rhodes has got the difficult situation, which is we ride up on his gearbox. We're almost taking our gearbox camera off there. That is what is James Carr, and they're making the switch. They have decided coming out to turn number 4 that Rhodes is going to release James Carr. Meanwhile, further back you can see the Micah Hendricks here all over the back of Schinck, and I think Schinck in that contact into this corner on the previous lap, he has picked up some sort of damage on the car because you can see he's just got no pace unless he's right now on the very verge of potentially picking up a drive-through penalty, and he's suddenly having his heart in his mouth in terms of he can't afford any contact. But Schinck definitely struggling for pace now after that moment on the previous lap, and as they now go on to lap number 16, Hendricks up to P6. But look at this, Giovanni Romano creeping closer. Meanwhile, further back, we see Matt Shepka there with a slowdown by looks of things, releasing Logan McKenzie up into P11 as he drops to P12. But definitely there is a bit of drama up and down the field. I think we're now entering a bit of a calm phase here as we make our way towards the halfway point of this race. Indeed, some of the battles starting to just gradually come down, but of course it is the calm before the storm. We've got plenty of time still to go, and I think now everybody into that transitional phase of focusing on delivering those consistent lap times, and none more so than Robert Abrams, who right now has got James Carr behind him, and James Carr has closed up so rapidly. There's been no off track for Robert Abrams. It is the case that James Carr is absolutely flying. And to put it in perspective, the only driver who is faster than James Carr right now by a significant margin is Micah Hendricks behind, who is lapping about a 10th faster. But James Carr is the fastest man on circuit. He took a half second out of Robert Abrams on the previous lap. And as they make the way out to that first corner and in towards 2 here, you can see James Carr up the inside. And I think Abrams here, I think he just feels though he's not on form here today at the Red Bull Ring, because we've seen Abrams make very fast starts, but as soon as we get to around 13-14 minutes, it's almost as if we see a different car in the hands of Robert Abrams. It just does not want to cooperate. He's able to keep it on track, there's no doubt about that, but there it's almost as if James Carr's in a different pace, and it's not to take away from Abrams. We know how quick he is, but I think Abrams is just struggling with the car as that tyre wear begins to accumulate, and in return, James Carr by comparison just seems to have found a magic formula, both of them of course in the Hyundai Elantra, and James Carr is charging. Look at how much speed he's pulling on Abrams coming out to the final corner here. I'm going to put my money on now that within about 4 to 5 laps, it could be the case that James Carr closes that 3-second gap down to Achitello in P2. He could halve it very quickly because he is on a charge, and that last lap, James Carr just took 3 tenths out of Achitello. He is not waiting around here as they make the way through turn number 2 once again. Meanwhile, as they roll the way through, we look to a little bit further back here to P9 driver Daniel Steno. The Blue Flag Motorsports driver staying with Romano in front of him. And the key thing with Romano here, of course, he's a bit of an oddity, Romano, and Daniel Steno as well. I think Steno's doing a lot of tyre preservation work right now because he hasn't really been tapping into the pace that we've seen him deliver. I think he's focusing more on the later portion of this race. And Giovanni Romano, we've talked about time and time again how he's been very gentle in his approach to the race, and he hasn't really put up too much resistance when drivers have come up to pass him. But I think now, as we've gone into the second half, he's going to up the pace, and we're waiting to see how much he ups it by. But as he makes his way across the timeline here, we look from them to a bit further up to Robert Abrams here, who now finds himself under pressure from Justin Rhodes, who as we ride on board here with Justin Rhodes, the P5 driver for Breakfast Dinner in the 84 car. He's got a face on Robert Abrams in front of him, and of course he will not be used to this position, I think, where he's able to just have so much pace over Robert Abrams. Indeed, many a driver here, I think, will be thinking, what is wrong with Abrams' car today? So he's normally so far up the field and got into the distance, and we've seen multiple examples of that. But Rhodes right now going on that mission to try and get that P4, getting closer and closer here, out to turn number 4, up into 5, takes a little bit of a look into turn number 5, but tucks it back in here. It's a little bit of a look, nothing more than that. He's going to have to wait, and indeed, I don't think he wants to put too much pressure onto Abrams and cause him to have to go overly defensive, as otherwise he'll lose the run on his teammate Carr, who's in P3. But as they make the way out to the final corner here, going up the gearbox, charging up towards turn number 1, and as he does, Rhodes getting closer and closer. He peels the inside. It's a battle on the brakes. On the brakes he goes into turn 1, and Justin Rhodes rolls his way through the corner, but he has to give the space to Abrams, who does very well to keep it too wide. And look at Micah Hendricks here, who says, well, if you two are going to squabble, I'm going to go for a 2-for-1. But you can see Abrams there covers the door shut, and Micah Hendricks can only get the 1 place. But that was a great bit of opportunistic driving there from Micah Hendricks to say, well, if you two are battling, I'm going to get the run into turn number 2. And he almost made it a 2-for-1 special there, but they weren't doing a 2-for-1 special at the Red Bull Ring. It is the case they're only doing Red Bull by the 1 can, by the 1 place out on circuit, and Hendricks has to wait once again as they make the way into turn number 5. But as they roll the way through the right-hander here, it is the case the 473 driver definitely now looking very feisty as we make our way closer and closer to the 20-minute mark. And as they roll the way out to the final corner here to go on to lap number 21, Hendricks definitely in the driving seat as he heads up towards the corner of 1, and as he heads into the outer corner, can he make the move here late on the brakes on Abrams? No, he can't. But meanwhile, further back, we can see it is the case that Daniel Steno makes his way past Giovanni Romano on the start finish straight. And Romano, again, not offering a defense there into turn number 1, just simply letting it go on the outside line. And I think, again, Romano here is waiting for that final 10 minutes or so where the car will be in its prime versus rivals. But to be fair, with there only being a couple of minutes before we hit that final third, I would have expected Romano to start to take a little bit more out of the car, unless I'm completely mistaken here, and it is the case he's running as fast as possible. He's just got no pace in the car, but normally we would see a fight from Romano. This is a very different tone. He's got to surely be saving the car for the final 5 minutes or something along those lines, because otherwise for him to just be focusing on P9, to be fair, if that's what he feels is in the car today, then it's completely understandable. But it's not the Giovanni Romano, the dogged battling Romano that we saw at Alton Park. But to be fair, perhaps the car's not offering it. As we see Daniel Zeno there with a slow down, letting the place go in the run to turn number 1. David Bauer, meanwhile, going side by side here with Shepka into turn 1 on the inside here for P12, and up the inside he rolls the breakfast for dinner driver, and he gets the move done there versus the Talk Steer Racing driver as they head down towards turn number 2. As they head up into the right hander here, Shepka not having a response, and I think really just not a happy day for anybody in the Honda Civic Type R. Indeed, the Talk Steer Racing driver really feeling that. But meanwhile, speaking of feeling it, here's the case Robert Abrams feeling the struggles right now with his car, as we can see here that Hendricks trying to go around the outside of turn number 5, but Abrams is not giving this up. He's going to make it as hard as possible, and indeed trying to go around the outside of turn number 6. We'll say it's not so. We can see that Hendricks there has to back out as Abrams gets to run out the corner. He weaves at the start of the straight here. He knows that it is the case. It's a long charge up towards 1, and Hendricks is being pushed along by Rhodes in the run to 1. And he's got to defend here versus Rhodes, who tries to go around the outside. Rhodes definitely doesn't find it. Instead, he finds that Hendricks stays there. But what is the case now is that Micah Hendricks finds himself between a rock and a hard place, and this is what Robert Abrams needs. He needs Hendricks to have to defend versus Rhodes. He can't afford to keep on defending, because every time he defends, Abrams only hurts the car even more. Those tyres are absolutely screaming right now, and Robert Abrams is showing no signs of being able to stop those tyres from screaming. It is the case. They just seem not to be there. Meanwhile, Hendricks is flying, but Abrams is offering such a solid defence that right now Hendricks has got to find some magical wound pass. As we see there, the rear brake disc flying red hot on Hendricks' Veloster. It is the case. That brake bias is as far back as it can be now. The rear brakes are being pushed to their limit to rotate their car into each and every corner, and as they make the way up the hill here in towards what is turn number 1, I can tell you with all this happening, it is the case our top 2 are inching closer together, and we'll very shortly cut to them as we wait to see whether there's a move into turn 2 from Hendricks. No, but as they make the way into 2, we look to our leaders who are going through turn number 3, and I kid you not, John Malzon, your leader, who you can see here, is being caught by Achatella, as Achatella has brought that gap down over the last couple of laps, only by a 10th a lap, but he's brought it down now to what is half a second. Could we see Achatella take the win in race number 3 here? Could we see history being made by having a Delta driver, the first Delta driver to take an overall win in the series? And as they make the way out of the final corner, I believe it could happen as Jesse Butters into the pit for what is a drive-through penalty, as we're to understand it. But as they make the way across that timeline, it's definitely looking as though Achatella in the charging position here, as meanwhile Hendricks getting a good run out the final corner, looking up into turn 1 for P4 on the inside here of Abrams. Abrams is going to try and force him as close as possible to the apex curve, but I think now the door's open. Abrams comes across to cover off what is a potential 2 for 1 by Rhodes, but in the run to turn 2, you can see Abrams having to go defensive here. Hendricks is given the clearance to cement that P4 position, and now Hendricks has got to go charging. He's got to find 6 seconds of time to close up to James Carr up the road, as meanwhile now the next driver who's got to battle his way whilst Robert Abrams in position is Justin Rhodes here, and in the Elantra you can imagine he's got his own tyre warnings and issues to worry about, and tyre wear I should say, trying to find the right word in the English dictionary. But as they make their way through 5 into 6, Justin Rhodes now has got it all to do as Hendricks tries to run away. And as they make the way through the final corner here and heading up towards turn number 1, and once again it is the case. You can see how Rhodes inching closer here in the draft, and Abrams going defensive, putting the car in the middle of the road, and Rhodes thinks about coming back to the inside at the last possible moment, but he can't. But as a result, he has to back out into the corner, and this is where Francois Schink comes alive in the charge out of the first corner and down towards turn number 2. Does he dive to the inside? No, as we're hearing that Corey Flute has had to jump to the pit lane. It's a disaster for Corey Flute. That's very unfortunate if what we're hearing is correct. It is the case, he's had a retirement, but as they roll their way through the corner, so you can see Giovanni Romano in P8. Well, he's seen all this battling in front of him, but he's just not there on the pace, and perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps Romano just does not have the pace in that Civic like the other Honda drivers here, and instead it is just a case of trying to survive and get as many points as possible, and really just not offering a resistance until the very last couple of laps. But I think Romano at this point will try to turn the wick on as much as he can. 6 minutes to go, and to be fair, he's not too far away from that potential opportunity of taking more points on the board here. He's in P8 currently, but you can imagine he would love to potentially finish inside that top 5 here. That'd be a huge result in the Honda as he makes his way up towards turn number 2, but he's got to get through the log jam here. That is, of course, being generated by Robert Abrams. So to be fair, Robert Abrams right now making that Yellow Flag Motorsports Elantra as wide as humanly possible as we ride on board here, looking backwards from his car, and as Abrams makes his way through turn number 4, you can imagine that Rhodes and Shink both queuing up to go on the fight. At the same time, Abrams will be trying to get Rhodes to fall backwards towards Shink and force the two to come together. But speaking of coming together, as they make the way through turn number 5, it is the case we look to our leaders, and this is your top 3. John Lauzon leads, but look at this as they make the way out towards turn number 1. It is the case that John Lauzon under pressure from Achatella, and behind him James Carr inching ever closer as well as the 3 make their way through turn number 1. They come on through further back. We can see that Giovanni Romano starting now with 5 minutes to go. He's been waiting until the clock has struck 25 minutes precisely, but now he's unleashing what pace he's got in that Honda Civic, what times he's been able to preserve by comparison, and he's inching closer to Shink. But we must look to our leaders here as they make the way through what is turns 3 and 4. They charge up towards turn number 5, and as they come all the way up towards turn number 5 at this point, it is the case that Achatella really right now find himself in absolute difficulty in the fact he wants the win, there's no doubt, but he's got James Carr who's been saving it all up. And as we ride on board here with James Carr as he makes his way out of the final corner, 4 minutes on the clock, 5 more laps of racing as we hear that Justin Rhodes is into the pit lane with a drive-through penalty as we're to understand it, which is very unfortunate. But right now James Carr very close to the back of Achatella there as they make their way through the corner, but no way through. But you can see John Lauzon is feeling the pressure. He goes defensive into 2 unnecessarily, but that shows you the mental pressure that's being exerted on a race leader as they roll their way through 2 into 3 here on the switchback, and as they make the way through 3 and up into 4. Any one of these 3 right now with a 6-second advantage to P4 could win this as they make the way up towards 5. Who will it be as they head into the turn 5 right-hander? Well, James Carr at this point has to play this smart. He can't afford to get into a fight versus Achatella and just simply let Lauzon off the hook. That he has to pick the time to make the move on Achatella if he's going for that P2 first, unless he's going to wait here and wait until the final couple of laps. Indeed, we've got a few more laps to go here. They head across that timeline onto lap number 30. They've still got 4 laps to go as we're to understand it if my mental maths is correct. But as they roll the way through the right-hander at turn number 1 this time, you can see it is as they were the previous time they came around. They're heading all the way through and up into the right-hander. James Carr springs his shot into turn number 2. He rolls up on the inside here under braking, and Achatella leaves the door open there, and I think it might be the case that Achatella's thinking it's not over yet. Let him go. Let him upset John Lauzon's rhythm, and then he'll get back into it here. But regardless, the number 55 driver at this point is going to be the clear Delta winner should nothing upsetting happen to the car. But he still wants that win. You can be sure of that. He would love to pick up the winner's points here today. It would be huge points on the board. And meanwhile, into the pits comes James Carr with a drive-through penalty. That's a late disaster. Well, we said, could anything happen? Well, it is the case that John Lauzon is now being given a lifeline. One of his rivals is knocked out of this hunt for the win, but still it's a 2-way fight to the end here as they make the way up the hill. Meanwhile, further back, that means Micah Hendricks now moves up into P3 as he makes his way past Takahashi, who is a lap down at this point. Further back, Giovanni Romano continues to try and find a way into the P5 position that's being held by Francois Schenk as more drive-through penalties are being accumulated. Of course, Blondell's come in with one. 2 minutes still on the clock. There could still be more penalties here. This is absolute drama at the deadlock as they make the way on around here at the Red Bull Ring National Circuit. And right now, nobody will want a drive-through at this point. Indeed, you never want a drive-through, but you don't want it this late in the race because it's a huge upset when it comes. And as they make the way all the way out towards turn number 5 here, it is the case. We've got a 3-way fight on for P5. Francois Schenk trying to hold on to this P5 until the very end ahead of Giovanni Romano and Daniel Sedino as they roll their way through the right-hander at turn number 5. And then in the lead, we do have John Lauzon here with 2 laps left. He's trying to hold off the charging star of Achatella, who as he makes his way through turn number 1 once more. It is the case in front of them. That is Justin Rhodes, one of the drivers who only moments ago was battling to be in the top 5, but a drive-through penalty paid dividends to that. And as they make their way into turn number 2, it is the case that Achatella right now all over the back of Lauzon as we roll away through turn number 3 on board here with the second place driver. He's doing everything he can here, but the Elantra's just got the straight line speed. As you can see, Agitator literally has to stay in the slipstream all the way out to the braking zone. He thinks about it. He looks to go on the inside into turn number 5, but he has to back out there. He'll have one more chance, one more lap as they head around for the final time to go on to lap number 33. Can Agitator find his way through? Can Lauzon keep him at bay? Or are we being denied it here with a slowdown? I think we're being denied it. It's the case. It's a slowdown for Agitator, and that releases John Lauzon. One more lap to go. He can't afford to get anything wrong right now. He's got a 1.2 second gap. That's all he needs to manage to the very end. Meanwhile, Francois Schinck still holding off Giovanni Romano for P5. They're closing to Robert Abrams, but Abrams is being given a major breather here in the fact that Schinck has to look more rearwards and frontwards. And as they make the way through turn number 2, the clock strikes 13 minutes. The checker flag will be out the next time our leader comes to the finish line. And as they make the way through turns 2 and 3, Schinck having to defend very hard here all the way through, but he's keeping it together. But we look from them to our leader. He makes his way for the penultimate corner. He keeps it clear, and as he comes through the final corner, it's been a dogged resistance all the way to the end. But here he comes. It's Beaver Buzz's John Lauzon who takes the win ahead of Connor Agitella, who takes P2 and the win in the Delta class. And then it will be Micah Hendricks a further 5 seconds back, who takes P3 ahead of Robert Abrams, who held on to P4, ahead of Francois Schinck P5, Giovanni Romano P6, Daniel Cellino P7, Jerome Pachulas P8, who just holds off David Bauer to the line, Bauer P9, Logan McKenzie completes the top 10, and then it will be Matt Shepka there, P11, ahead of Spencer Cockayne, who will come through P12 a little bit further back, having been harassed by Travis Hall for some time. But as they make the way through turn number 6 right now, my goodness, it is the case that Spencer Cockayne having to work hard. That's P3 in the Deltas here today on the Delta podium, and in Travis Hall, P13. It will then be Aaron Lahr, P14, not been his day today, is it, for Aaron Lahr? And then it will then be Auguste Blondel, who just comes in ahead of Justin Rhodes there, P16 Justin Rhodes, and then Jesse Bodas P17 finishing a lap down ahead of James Carr, Casey Nimitz, Fernando Takahashi, and then Corey Fluke with that retirement. Daniel Smith not making it to the grid, and Adrian Fedorowski in the end finishing at P23. But my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic race from start to finish. Would you believe it? And well, now we have to take a look at the race standings, or not the race standings, my apologies, the championship standings after today's round. Well, after another brilliant round of racing, it has to be said, here are the latest Drivers' Championship standings. Of course, we didn't have those last time out at Monza. They were not available, but now they are fully updated. And after today's 3 sprint races, and all student decisions have come on in for the races at the Red Bull Ring National, it is the case in the first through to 10th, Robert Abrams continues to lead, but his championship advantage is gradually being brought down. It is the case now, that advantage only standing at 37 points, and whilst 37 points sounds massive, I can tell you it can swing one way or the other from round to round, and Francois Schinck gradually nibbling that gap down little by little. But you can imagine it is the case the Beaver Buzz driver wants to take a bigger chunk out of that gap come the next round at Imola. In P3, John Lauzon there, gradually closing the distance to the top 2 and breaking away from his pursuers in the rest of the top 10. Now standing on 285 points, he is the best part of what is there, 49 points clear of Jerome Pachulas, who has moved up to P4. David Bauer moves up to P5 on 233 points, and Logan McKenzie with a very difficult day, struggling to finish inside that top 10. And finishing P10 in that final race, of course, now in P6 on 223 points. Con Achatella there, the Delta Championship leader. It is the case. The rookie for this season on 202 points continues to fly. And I think he'll be thinking only what could have been if he picked up the win in that final race, the sprint feature race. But still, he's got to look ahead because he is definitely looking incredibly strong as the racing continues. And he's up to P7 ahead of both James Carr and Gurkan Demir. Gurkan Demir, of course, not in attendance today. And then Matthew Shepka in P10 there in what is a very difficult situation for the Honda driver, given the fact 171 points means that when we look to P11, he is only 10 points ahead of Daniel Smith there, the best of the rest in P11. And well, Daniel Smith, after a difficult day, has dropped backwards to a degree in terms of the points, and he is being hunted by Micah Hendricks. Although I think the points calculation there a little bit wrong, given the fact that Micah Hendricks is on 163. I think it may be the case that the two of them are in the wrong order there. We'll have to get that updated for the next round. But regardless there, we do have Justin Rhodes in P13, followed by Daniel Sedino and Aaron Lahr. And Gus Blundell in P16 was looking very fast at the Red Bull Ring National, but that quickness and qualifying not translating into dominant result form in the races. Giovanni Romano P17, a difficult day for Giovanni Romano. Adrian Fedorowski P18, Travis Hall P19, and Eric Statzer in P20. And as we look from our top 20 here, it is the case, looking outside the top 20, Wiley Cox not in attendance today on 62 points, and now only 7 points clear of Corey Fluke, who put in a brilliant set of performances today, it had to be said, with the Audi RS3 driver literally getting everything he could out of the car. And then Michael McLeod, P23, we look forward to his return ahead of Alex Jensen and Jesse Bodaz. Then Casey Nemeth, Fernando Takahashi, Jonathan Stroll, Paul Mikolajczyk, and what is Scotty Lunn completing the top 30. And then outside the top 30, but not to be forgotten about, Spencer Cockayne picking up a couple more points today, ahead of Brandon Veers, Dom Savio, Sean Gurd, Steve Hansel, and then Jorge Zuniga complete our championship standings. But you may be asking, well, that's the Drivers' Championship standings. What about the Teams' Championship standings? Beaver Buzz continue to lead with a margin now of what is 71 points ahead of Yellow Flag Motorsports. But indeed, the rivalry between these two teams has now expanded to include a third component, and that is breakfast for dinner. They are inching closer to the top two. They are now only 79 points off of Yellow Flag Motorsports. And if they continue at this rate, you can imagine they will be right up there to make it a three-way fight for the Team's Championship title as they make their way through these rounds. And Torque Steer Racing, the best of the rest there in P4 on 446 points, well clear of Blue Flag Motorsports, who need to find their rhythm. They've got the pace, they've got the drivers, but it just does not seem to be coming together at this point in time. QZ Motorsports in P6, unfortunately we did not see Adrian Fedorowski take to the circuit today. Technical issues mean that the Honda Civic Type R did not make it to the grid for any of the three races. And then Gasparilla Motorsport on 6 points in last but not least in P7. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, those are the standings, and it's time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you did enjoy today's show and you did enjoy the racing and want to know more about the Alpha Touring Challenge, the ATC, and you might be sat there thinking right now, I love touring cars, I have iRacing, I own one of the 4 touring cars available, and I want to be involved in this, then why not get in touch with us by checking out our website. Indeed, that's the Alpha Touring Challenge website of alphatouringchallenge.wordpress.com. Alternatively, if you want to go straight to the source in our Discord channel and talk to the drivers and the organisers, you can always go to the link shown on screen there, the official invite link. But indeed, it is the case as the series presses on here, it's only continuing to increase by popular demand. And indeed, the popularity of the Red Bull Ring National was a bit controversial, but I can tell you one circuit that's very popular because we're heading there in a week's time. It is the Imola circuit, known in full as the Autodromo International Enzo E. Dino Ferrari. We head back to Italy for a brilliant circuit, and round number 7, it will take place tomorrow. In fact, it will be taking place as of what will be Monday the 22nd of August, but we'll be bringing you all the racing action as if it were live on Friday the 26th of August 2022. It's a feature race round, it'll be about the strategy, but it's a circuit where overtaking can be in plentiful supply, and of course dropping it off the circuit can be very dangerous to your racing aspirations. Who will come out on top there? Could we potentially see Franz Washington continue to close that gap to what is our championship leader? All that and more will be found out in a week's time, but until then, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we've got for now. We have been the Alpha Touring Challenge. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.